Well, good evening. This is the Coeur d'Alene Planning and Zoning Commission, and this is our April meeting. It's Tuesday, April 8th, 2014. Shannon, would you do the roll call, please?
Jordan?
Here.
Bowlby?
Here.
Ingalls?
Here.
Lutrip?
Here.
Messina? Ward?
Here.
Connery?
Here.
O'Brien?
Here.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. All right, next, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so first of all,
Can't hear it.
oh, we have no mic.
We do by semaphore.
Please don't hit the mics, we'll turn it up.
We have mics now? Yes. Okay, we now have mics. All right. Thank you for alerting us. It's hard to tell up here if we have mics on or not. When I can hear myself echo, then now I know we have mics on. Okay, so next of all, we have approval of minutes from the March 11th meeting.
Mr. Chair, I just have one change, and that was in regards to a comment that I had made, and it was on the third page, second paragraph. And really what I had stated was that that the specific materials required for the homes, it was really, and not listed as a condition, which they were in the next project, Bella Reeves. It's not very clear how that's stated. So I just wanted to clarify, that's why I showed my concern, even though it is part of the building code, and that it was inconsistent with what we read for one project versus the other. And that's why I brought that up. So it was just that it was inconsistent, and I wanted to know, and we got a good answer as to why that happened.
Okay, anything else? Oh, yeah.
One other small thing, Mr. Chairman, it may be in the minutes, in the motion that was made, but it may also be in the findings, but I had thought that on the John's Loop project, the Rebel at Riverstone, that we'd talked about a 24th condition. You recall that? There was an item pertaining to maintenance of kind of a no man's land between the Centennial Trail and the backside of the development, and the developer said that they would be willing to do that. And I thought we had included that as part of the motion in making the findings. So as the findings come forward, I didn't see that 24th condition. Not a huge thing.
I remember something about that.
We can look into it for you.
I remember what John said, too.
All right. Anything else? So would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes with those two items noted?
Motion to approve the minutes with those changes noted.
And I'd second that.
Okay, a second by Bowlby. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Okay, next is the time on our agenda for public comment, and this would be if anyone is here to address the Planning Commission for an item other than those which are scheduled in the hearings tonight. If you have an item scheduled in the hearing, then there'll be time to testify then. Yes, Miss, please state your name and address.
No address. City
Okay.
is adequate. No one needs to give their proper street or mailing address.
How about your city?
You already know where that is, but Susie Snedeker, Coeur d'Alene.
Okay.
I just have a comment. In December, I addressed the Planning Commission relative to the Hagedon improvement, the proposed Hagedon improvement. And maybe it was, I don't think it was January. I don't even know where I am anymore because I'm commuting between here and someplace else. But there's a strip of land that's the extension of Second Street that goes from Sherman almost down to the water. And I have maps delineating that, and it also involved a lot of other stuff. But I want to know if the city is going to be posting that public property, because it is in fact public property.
Yeah,
And also, you know, there's a public dock there. Maybe it's time to put public dock, to sign the public dock as well. And the public dock is located between the office building and the hotel itself. But I really think in as much as it's public property, it should be noted that it is in fact public property, even though the Hagedorn Hospitality has improved it with landscaping and concrete. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Okay, how about staff comments?
Just a couple brief items. We did get a few items in for the May 13th Planning Commission meeting. We got a subdivision application, and then we got a combination of annexation, PUD, zone change, and a subdivision request. So that's what we have on the agenda for May.
Mr. Chair, are there any commissioner comments? I just wanted to make, that's at the end of the meeting, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I don't see commissioner comments on here.
We used to have commissioner
It used
comments.
to be on the agenda somewhere. I don't know when that dropped out. We probably should put that in here somewhere at the start of the
So
agenda.
I'm the reason it's not on there anymore.
Oh, okay.
And let me
Must be a
explain
good
why.
reason then, if you're the reason.
Part of the reason is because of our requirement of having an agenda, and we have to have everything on the agenda that we know that's going to be discussed that night. Putting commissioner comments on there, and frankly, you see this in other meetings, it causes problems because something comes up, it gets discussed. The general public isn't aware. They may have a desire to come speak to that issue, and we don't have any way to note it. We've talked about putting it as the last agenda item, essentially saying, next meeting, we would like to talk about this. And so then it can be placed on the agenda for the next meeting so that everyone then is aware of, at least has agenda notice of what topics may come up for discussion. So that's the reason it's not there anymore. So
It was
Is it
just an
not-
upbeat thing.
Is it not possible, though, there could be some commissioner comments that are not
it could be.
something that the public would necessarily want to or have to?
Yeah, it's
Address.
well, and again, if it's a matter of discussion, a decision item, it has to have an agenda notice. It has to be placed on the agenda. Various cities handle this in different ways. I know some cities always put their public comments as the last item on the agenda for that night for the same reason, being that if something comes up during the public comment section, they can say, okay, if we want to discuss this as a group, we put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
There's no perfect answer to that. It's one that we wrestle with a little bit, trying to make sure that we comply with agenda notice. It's not as easy as it used to be. There's been a couple changes in the law in the last, say, 4 years that have brought some more focus to that.
It was just upbeat on a good project. That's what I wanted to comment on.
Mr. Chair, I do have an item on a dead.
Have a comment about his comment?
No. If, the comment I'd have is if we were going to talk, it'd be easiest, I think, to do it at the end of the meeting.
Right.
Not to burden, the people here. But every once in a while, you hear me, I say a few things. It's nothing for the city to take action on, nothing for community, but just, sharing of ideas and thoughts and so forth.
See, I actually have a public comment I'd like to make, too. But if you want to do this at the end, that's okay. I think there could be comments to make which aren't something of an agenda nature.
Sure, and announcement-type items are not a problem. It's really discussion items or things that might lead to action items is where we get into problems.
Right.
I totally agree with that. So what do you suggest? We wait until the end of the
If
meeting?
you have announcement-type stuff, go ahead, that's fine.
Okay, she was first, and you're next.
Okay.
That would be fine with me to talk about it at the end.
Okay, but he said it's okay to do it now.
Oh, to do it now? It's okay to
Yeah,
do
if
it
you
now?
have
Oh,
announcement
I'm
type
sorry.
items,
No, I
that's
just
fine.
wanted to say I hope people like the disguised tree. I hope they're enjoying it. And I think that the stealth design for the cell tower, that's always been a passion of mine, and I'm very happy to see it. I think they've done a good job.
Yes.
And it's on Sherman, that's why you're asking. Nobody notices, which I think is grand. And I don't know, we'll talk about what happens to the other one, but I thought they did a very good job.
I have an item on the, for a possible item for the agenda for May. As you may recall, several years ago, maybe 5 years or so, there was less than professional civil attitude amongst planning and zoning members. And we recognize that as that there was a better way for us to work together to represent our community while maintaining our independent views, our professional experiences, and our civil discourse. To accomplish this, we developed, with the help of the City Attorney's Office, and approved our oath of office. It's been brought to my attention, we've not had the opportunity to provide our two newest members the opportunity to accept this oath in a public meeting. I would respectfully request that it be added to our agenda for May. Thank you.
I spoke with our legal counsel about that actually several weeks ago, and I guess you can comment on that now if you think it's appropriate, Warren, and we can put it on the agenda next time to talk about.
We can certainly have a discussion of it. What happened is essentially the two new commission members have taken their oath. It's not necessary that it happened at the meeting. It was as a matter of convenience. They were both in the building. The city clerk was in the building, and so the oath was administered. That's the important piece. I've also talked with Commissioner Lutrip about that, and that's kind of, there's nothing that requires that it be done in public. It was done as a matter of convenience for everyone involved. So if the commission wants to have them in the future happen always on TV, then that's something that we should talk about and set up how you want to proceed. But
I just think it's very important for our transparency and so forth to do it at a public meeting. Thank you.
Well, with respect to Commissioner Lutrip, I'm fine if you want to put that on for a discussion item at the next meeting. I don't think it's going to be too long of a meeting. What do you think about that?
we'll see. It might be a long meeting, but
It
I don't
be.
think it's a terribly long discussion to have, so that's.
Right. Okay, thank you. My discussion item was already covered by Commissioner Bowlby. It just concerns the new cell tower. And if anyone hasn't noticed it, I'll just add to what you said. It's right behind Michael D's on East Sherman. To me, it kind of looks like a red fir tree that's maybe been topped off a little bit, but it looks pretty darn good. And the nice thing about this is you can look at that, and then just a couple blocks away to the, kind of to your left or to the east, you can see the blue cell tower that was from the older technology that's about 20 years old or so. And so it's a nice comparison people can look at and see what the new law requires, the new ordinance that we've done a number of years ago where we can require things like the stealth tower as opposed to the older technology tower that you can see there. So it makes a great example while the old tower is still there. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Okay. I guess that's it for staff comments and commissioner comments. And next we have approval of findings for PUD 2-14 and S-4-14.
So I had commented on those earlier with respect to seemingly a missing condition. With that correction made that added a 24th condition, I would motion that for approval of PUD, I lost my place, 2-14, and for the findings for PUD 214 and subdivision 414 findings
Okay.
as corrected.
Do we have a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Ward. So is there any more discussion on that one? Does that sound okay, staff? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay,
Nay.
all right. So that passes. We have one opposed, but it passes. Does anybody want to make a motion on the next one?
Yeah, I should say nay on that also, because we voted nay on that as far as the minutes, to stay consistent with the voting. I
Okay,
was just looking at that. So it would
we
be
better
two.
do a roll call.
Yeah, 2 and 2, or you'd have to vote. I'm sorry, I wasn't listening, I'm looking at, trying to figure
But
out
you probably should
these
reference,
minutes.
you probably should reference which one it is and do a roll call.
Chairman, there's no reason at this point, if you're just approving the findings, all you're doing is approving the findings. It doesn't reflect, it doesn't change how you voted on the underlying motion. That's captured in the findings themselves.
That's what I
So
thought.
this is just to approve the findings.
Okay, but if we're going to have 2 people vote no, and I see 2 other yeses, and the students don't have a vote, what
Yeah, I
what do you
guess that's
want-
what I'm saying is-
Unless one of them changes their vote, what do you want to
There's-
do?
The findings reflect the action of the Planning Commission at the last meeting. So already built into those findings is the 2 votes in the negative from the last meeting. So there's no reason to vote no on the findings. All the findings are doing is saying what happened at the last meeting. It's not changing how you voted at the last meeting.
I feel that the findings do not reflect my view of the project.
And that's fine if we're going to, the
Therefore, I'm voting
difficulty
nay.
you're going to have tonight then is you don't have sufficient votes to approve the findings.
Can the chair come
We
and
do.
vote?
We've got the chair.
And, yeah, I guess that's correct. I was trying to think who was here, who was missing from last meeting. Tom is the one that was missing.
Right.
I'm not interested in killing this necessarily.
No.
I don't want to be an obstructionist, but I have a certain view in that, and that is carries on consistent to tonight. If that causes a problem because Tom is here, then I'd certainly move to set it over for, till the next meeting, till we have a fuller quorum.
I actually think Commissioner Lutrip has a point, because when I read through the findings, I did not agree with them either, because then I thought, didn't
So-
I go against this? So that was,
So, and I don't have the findings in front of me. The findings should reflect essentially the decision made. So if the decision was to approve, that would be what's reflected in the findings. If it was to
Right.
deny, that's what would be reflected in the findings.
and it was reflected to approve. With, yeah,
And it reflects Chairman Bowlby voting no, Chairman Lutrip voting no.
right. So it was.
So that's already captured in the findings.
But if you don't agree with the findings, then you can't vote yes on that. Because I do agree with Commissioner Lutrip that when I went through the findings, it's not what I would have done if I did the findings. And I can understand what he's saying. And I kept reading it, and I thought, I don't think I've ever been in this position before.
So if you don't agree with the findings, then you would make a motion to amend the findings.
Well, it's just 2 people.
I certainly could make a motion to amend the findings, and if that motion failed, that wouldn't necessarily cause me to vote for this. I mean, we can do that. It is just, I think, be sort of, I don't know the benefit of it. I don't know if we get any place.
Can the chair not vote for it or vote against it?
Yeah, if the chair was here, I was trying to remember who was missing last meeting, so
Chair
I
was
think the
here.
chair could vote
Yeah.
here because he was
Why don't we
he was
do that as
present.
cleanliness? Can we
But-
not do it that way?
Again, it's the the findings reflect, in theory, what happened, so it shouldn't matter.
Well,
Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes, with the chair is 6, because I think it shows 6, so we had a full complement of everybody here except for the 1 vacancy.
Well, Warren, in the interest of moving this forward, I guess they can vote against it or make a motion to amend it, but I don't, is there anything wrong with going ahead and doing a roll call, and then I vote to break the tie if there's a tie?
Yeah, if that would get us off dead center, that's fine.
Thank you, okay. Would you do a roll call on that?
That would work better. Bowlby?
nay.
Ingalls?
Aye.
Messina? Lutrip?
Nay?
Ward?
Aye.
Okay, so the chairman votes yes. And that's the first tie I've had to break for, I don't know.
Long time.
2 or 3 years, yeah.
And I'm not used
Well,
to
thank
this,
you for
because
the
normally
experience.
we'll do the conditions. You know, in the old days, we always used to do the conditions, so I kind of just, I understand. Thank you for jogging my memory.
Well,
Okay, well, I respect everyone's opinions on this, and now it's time to move forward and do the next one.
S414.
Yeah, I guess we're at S414. Would anyone like to make a motion on that?
I'm not seeing any
This would be a motion
to
for
approve.
approval of the findings that were drawn by
Yeah,
legal
so it's a
staff.
motion for approval of the findings denying the requested zone.
Denying.
Actually, it's S414. That would be
That-
accepting it.
It carried by a 3-2 vote.
Yeah. This is S414, which is, it was also, there were two that we had to do.
I think I missed it because I
think you're-
thought your last motion encompassed both of the items on the revel.
It could happen.
Did you do, or I thought we were doing them separately. Okay, so the last one was PUD 214 and S414?
As I said that, I rolled them together, so.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, great, so we're beyond that. Okay, now we're at A-2-14.
Here we go.
And here again, we already had the hearing, but this is to approve the minutes that approve the findings that legal staff did.
Mr. Chair, I would vote to approve minutes.
Okay, motion by Bowlby,
second?
second by Luttrip. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so A2-14, the findings are unanimously approved. We have one administrative item tonight. This is a proposed short plat, CDA Enterprises LLC, Lot 1, Block 1, Fruitlands, Second Edition, a proposed one-lot preliminary plat called Fruitlands Second Edition, SS-4-14. Good evening, Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is really a short plat that covers the area that is now under construction for Golden Corral and what will be Buffalo Wild Wings. They're consolidating several lots in there for various reasons that have to do with buildings across lot lines and cap fees and blah, blah, blah. So this plat combines those lots into one. They're all under common ownership right now. And actually, the improvements have already been installed. If you notice, there's a condition to install improvements on Fruitland, and they've already completed that. So pretty straightforward.
This was the one where initially we had it, the whole lot was all put into parking strips. And then it was, we modified it, so there were certain parking things, parking slots identified that met the needs of the Golden Corral, and was recognized that the rest of the property was owned by a common thing, and something forth was coming forth, and this is it, is coming forth.
Okay.
I assume, there's no change in the parking spaces allocated for the Golden Corral, and they're happy with that, so, okay, very good, thank you.
Just cleaning it up.
Yes, the ownership, yeah.
Gordon, just a procedural question, if you could help me as I go forward in this seat. The condition that has to do with the frontage improvements on Fruitland, just curious why the need for that condition. I thought all of that kind of lived in ordinance anyway to where you would basically be protected to get that requirement mandated, no?
Not with a short plat. You have to actually make it a condition. And at the time we started this, it wasn't, I'm not sure Chris knew that it was on the building permit for them to do the requirements. So can't hurt to be on there, but it actually isn't, yeah.
Thanks.
And by the by, this will be the last time you see me doing a short plat. The subdivision ordinance goes to council April 15th, and assuming that they approve it, which we expect they will, short plats will be handled now by the engineering department, at staff level. So our little time together, I'll have to come just for old time's sake.
We'll have a celebratory party every once in a while. Thank you.
How will the public, will that go out to the public to let them know what's?
Yeah. There was a noticing requirement in the new ordinance, so we'll mail notices. But they're not noticed right now, except on your agenda.
I see. I just was wondering how you could keep it transparent for people that live around there to know what's going on.
Yeah, there'll
that
be
they-
mailings to the adjacent properties, time for comment, so.
Right, we essentially simplified it and changed it to an administrative item, but we did add a noticing requirement, which it didn't have before.
Correct.
So
Right.
that's probably a pretty good fit now. So we'll just see you on the more complicated items.
Yeah, I expect.
Do you want to have a findings, Mr. Chair, or is there any discussion?
I don't think was there any other questions? Okay, so somebody could make a motion, like Commissioner Bowlby or somebody.
Mr. Chair, as of SS 414 Fruitland Second Edition, I would suggest that we approve with the one proposed condition.
Second.
Okay, then we have the motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that passes unanimously, SS-4-14. Okay, so we have, what do we have, 2 public hearings tonight? 3, well, 3. One is ordinance, so we have 2 public hearings. The first one here is River's Edge Apartments LLC is the applicant. This is 2772 West Celtice Way. Thank you. And we have, let's see, 2 parts to this. This is a proposed 3.84 acre, I guess that would be, annexation from county industrial to city C-17. That's quasi-judicial, that's A-3-14, and then a proposed R34 density increase special use permit in the C-17 zoning district, and that would be SP-1-14.
Thank you, Chairman
And
Jordan.
I imagine Tammy has the staff report.
I do. So,
By the way, is there any conflicts to declare on this? Okay, thank you, Tammy, go ahead.
you're welcome. Thank you. I'll begin with, we'll talk about the location of the subject property. This is Celtice Way, Atlas Road. It's on the south side of Celtice. It's a 3.85 acre parcel. This is the subject property here, and this dark line is the existing current city limit line. This is an aerial view of the site. As you can see there, this was a former site of the Stimson office building. It's no longer there. It's been removed. This is a little bit of a crest of a hill here where the building was located, and then it kind of drops down as far as the topography. Celtice Way here, and probably to the west of this, you can't quite see it on here, is where the Washington Trust site was, and further over to the east is Riverstone. So this evening, as we usually do, we'll go through the findings, and first I'll work my way through the information for the annexation piece of the request, and then I'll discuss the special use permit request. So just as a little bit of background information, as you mentioned, the applicant and owner of the property is River's Edge Apartments, LLC. The subject property is located on the south side of Celtice Way, previously the site of the Stimson Lumber office building. Previous actions around the property, A113, which is the Washington Trust property, that was approved in June of 2013. And then A304, which was a 77-acre parcel known as the Central Premix site. That was approved in November of 2004. So the first finding that the proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies. So the green is the area of transition as it notes in our legend, and this is the subject property. Again, the red is the current city limits line. Transition areas are areas where the character of the neighborhood is in transition and should be developed with care. The street network, the number of buildings and lots, and in general, land uses are expected to change greatly within the planning period. The portion of the subject property to be annexed is within the area of city impact. So I have provided information in your staff report on page 7. It discusses information about the Spokane River District tomorrow, and that's the area where this lies within the comprehensive plan. Under the characteristics of the Spokane River District, it lists a few items you want to take a look at. And then I've also included significant policies on pages 7, 8, and a few on page 9. That public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. So on page 9 of your staff report is where the staff analysis begins, and I'll briefly cover some of these. As far as sewer, public sewer is available to the subject property along the northern property line within the Saltese Way right-of-way. Sewer capacity has not yet been determined, and they won't determine that until the developer has determined what he will develop on the property. As far as water, the property is currently fronted by an existing 8-inch AC water main on the south side of Saltese Way. And then it goes on to talk about the amount of water that can be provided, and that they'll need to determine whether they can have adequate water for the development, and they'll look a little further about the density that will be provided on the site. We have had previous discussions with the developer and made them aware of some of the items that they'll have to deal with when they develop the property if it is annexed. As far as stormwater, City Code requires a stormwater management plan to be submitted and approved prior to any construction activity on the site. We'll talk about traffic as I work through my information on the special use permit piece of the request. As far as streets, the roadway to the north of the subject property is a 4-lane median divided highway, US 10, that was primarily under jurisdiction of both the City of Coeur d'Alene, with small portions remaining under the jurisdiction of the Post Falls Highway District. Access and improvement requirements will be addressed when the property develops. Participation in the signalization of the adjacent Atlas Road, Saltese Way intersection may be a component of any annexation agreement that deals with the subject property. And as far as the annexation request, the fire department did not have any issues with it. So the next finding, that the physical characteristics of the site make or do not make it suitable for the request at the time. As I mentioned, the subject property is located at the crest of a small hill, and it's relatively flat on top where the old office building was located. The physical characteristics of the site do seem to be suitable for the request at this time, and the topography would not preclude development on the property. So this is a site looking west. You can see where the building used to be. And again, here's the site looking south. Okay. That the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. The subject property was previously the site of the Stimson office building, as I mentioned, and is now vacant. To the south, the east, the west of the site, it's all bordered by approximately 40 acres of unincorporated industrial land, previously the site of the lumber mill. As you can see on the land use map, there are some commercial uses here. This is the area where you recently approved the circuit on Saltese. That will eventually be single family. You've still got some commercial uses. Eventually there'll be some development on the area of the bank-owned property. And as I mentioned, this is currently vacant and within Kootenai County. As far as zoning, property across Saltese to the north is all commercial. This portion of Riverstone, which is further east, is also commercial. You've got R12 to the south and nearest C17 to the west. So the applicant is requesting a C-17 zoning for this requested annexation. And I've listed on page 5 the allowed uses in the C-17 zone that are principal uses by right. And in addition, there's a list of allowed special use permits. And that's what the applicant has brought forward this evening, a request for a residential density of the R34 special use permit. So finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and or existing land uses. So again, I've mentioned the streets that currently exist, that the roadway to the north is a 4-lane median divided highway, that's Celtice Way. And those are the findings for the annexation piece of the request. So the question would be the timing on annexing the parcel, the 3.85 acre, and is C-17 appropriate for the zoning? So the other piece of this request tonight is that the applicant has requested an R34 density special use permit. So on page 6 of your staff report, I talk a little bit about the C-17 zone and the number of units by right that would be allowed in the C-17 zone for multifamily is 67 units. If the R34 density is approved, the number of units would increase to 131 units on that property. The applicant has proposed 130 units. Also, Section 17.05.330 of the zoning ordinance requires that if the R34 density is approved, the request must meet the following requirements. Be in close proximity to an arterial as defined in the Coeur d'Alene Transportation Plan, sufficient to handle the amount of traffic generated by the request, in addition to that of the surrounding neighborhood. And the project and accessing the street must be designed in such a way as to minimize vehicular traffic through adjacent residential neighborhoods. And then the other criteria is that be in close proximity to shopping, schools, and park areas. So the next finding that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. And again, I spoke a little bit about the area where this falls within, which is the Spokane River District. It is in transition. And there it is on the map. The subject property is right here. Next finding, that the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. So this is a conceptual site plan that the applicant has submitted. It's noted in the staff report that it's a 5-story structure. 2 below-grade parking structures will be provided. Most of the parking will be provided in the basement levels, and then they've got some surface parking out front. They've provided 2 parking stalls per apartment unit. And this is an elevation. You can't quite see the height there. It's 63.6 inches. In the C-17 zoning district, you're allowed to go a maximum of 45 feet tall. When you request the R34 density increase, it also allows for a 63-foot height limit. And then on the hillside, our code allows for an additional story. So the last finding, that location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be served adequately by existing streets, public facilities, and services. So again, in your comments from staff, Engineering Department reported as far as traffic that based upon the requested density of R34, it may be feasible to construct 130 dwelling units on the subject property. The ITE Trip Generation Manual estimates the project may generate 45 to 57 ADTs respectively during the AM and PM peak hour periods. In the evaluation, it notes the adjacent street can accommodate the additional traffic volume. However, ingress and egress from the subject property may be compromised. Access through the median crossing will be required to be approved by the city engineer prior to any site development, and Plan submission showing modifications to the median will be required for approval. Westbound vehicular movements will be restricted, and barrier installations may be required to control traffic turning movements through the adjacent median. Also, turn pocket storage will be required to be constructed prior to the utilization of the median crossing at points of ingress and egress. And then Fire Department also commented for the proposed R34 density increase special use permit. All the Fire Department access and hydrant requirements will be addressed at the future project review for the project. So, and that is all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and the applicant's representative is also here.
Okay, thank you, Tammy.
I
You're
have some
welcome.
questions of Tammy. Tammy, I have a quick question for you, and it's more in regards to the unknowns that for the annexation, and it would be, how does it work if, for the applicant, if it's unfortunate that we don't have the capabilities under the sewer system, and would they have to change that out before they could actually go through the special use permit and do the building? What I'm saying is that if we annex this, we go along with that, and we have just a few red flags in regards to adequacy in pipes, et cetera, from what I'm reading. How does that work after it's annexed and you get the special use? Does that have to be changed out then in order for it to conform to the building?
It looks like the city engineer is coming to the
Good.
building.
I wanted to ask these questions because I didn't want to
Yeah,
put the
that's a
cart
good
before
question.
the...
So they would do the study to make sure that there's capacity
Right.
in that line, and if for some reason there isn't capacity, then there are options. The absolute worst case is there's no way to get enough capacity to serve that 130 units they're proposing, and they would have to downsize. But that's a real low probability. There's things that they can do with surge tanks and timing of discharge that would allow this to go forward. So,
And the same thing with the water. And I guess I just saw that as, okay, now wait a second. If the potentialities aren't there, then maybe we need to look at that first and before we annex.
So
to
I
make
think
sure
that
we're capable of
the
being
message to
able-
the planning commission is this property can be served by water
Okay.
and sewer. There
Okay.
is some scenario out there that would, as almost with every annexed piece,
Right.
that would say they could, exceed that, but this can be served by water and sewer. Sewer's comments were just to say, we need them to check, with their proposed development, and they may change their mind or do something different. But if they move forward with that, then there's a check-in for the modeling. So you don't need to worry that this can't be served by those facilities.
No, I just didn't think that it couldn't be, but I just wondered if it could create a complication for the city or for this developer that would take a while to remedy, that they
Yeah.
may have to downsize, and that's how I was looking at it. I
That's
wasn't
a very unlikely probability.
Okay.
Engineers work stuff like that out all the time.
sure. Okay.
So you're all set? So John was
I
next.
had a
and then
similar-
Peter, maybe?
I had a similar question in mind as I studied the staff report, and we have to make a finding whether or not utilities are available and adequate. And I guess we would say they're adequate for some kind of C-17, and we think they would be adequate for C-34, but that's not a guarantee. You just have to do the study and that sort of thing at building permit time, and be able to demonstrate at that time that you can serve that density. Any C-17 in the city, you could build a unlimited high-rise,
Right.
Empire State Building.
Right.
And certainly there are some C-17 that exists right now in the city that wouldn't have sewer of that capacity to do that project, and you'd have to downsize it. So it's kind of, this, as I read it, correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of a red flag, or kind of a heads up.
It's more of a heads up. I don't think it's a red flag. I think if it was, we
I
would
meant
not.
heads up, just a little
Yeah.
constructive dialogue, so
Right.
the developer knows there could be an issue there.
More to the developer on, as you move forward, we need you to check in, not so much the planning commission that there are sewer issues here.
I think we're here as the planning commission on these things to say whether or not we think the zoning works.
Yeah.
And then at the staff level, like engineering, they decide if there's adequate infrastructure for the use. That all gets worked out at the staff level by the various experts. So we don't have to tread that water and carry that burden on our shoulders. Gordon carries all that burden.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment,
Yes,
Peter?
Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, it seems to me that this is a two-step process. One, we determine what the zoning should be. So when the council considers annexation, they have our recommendation on the zoning.
Right.
Then once the council approves annexation, then the next step, I think, would come into play is the special use. The reason I bring this up specifically is a couple months ago, we had an annexation on Hanley. And in that annexation, we also approved a subdivision. So it went before the council, this is from the minutes of their meeting, went before the council, and the council said, yes, with that annexation, we would like to talk about parks, open space. And the council was advised, well, if you do that, you're going to have to change the zoning because the zoning has already been approved by planning and zoning. At the same time, we talked about annexation and the zoning for that. And I looked at that and thought, gosh, that's putting the council in a terrible position. If they want to talk about something, but they have to override an item that we have done, it doesn't appear to be a good flow. It doesn't appear to be beneficial to anyone. So it would seem to me, if my understanding of the meeting and my reading of the minutes is correct, it would seem to me that what we should do is first talk about annexation, what should the zoning be, and here it is, then pass it on to the council and let the council determine what any things they would like to put into the annexation agreement with the property owner. Then after that, then to come back to us and change the zoning if they want. But I would feel very uncomfortable to talk about zoning and then a special use at this time. Thank you.
Chairman, let me jump in for a second
to
here
comment, Gordon.
and explain our process. This is not unlike the annexation that Commissioner Luttrop is talking about. In that instance, you had an annexation request and subdivision request at the same time. That has been the process for at least longer than I've been here. Mm-hmm. Those items have come in together. That's been the city's process. That's how our code works. That's how our workflow works. What ends up happening is if you have approved the subdivision, then the annexation piece goes to council for them to make two decisions. One is essentially, does it make sense to annex this piece of property at this time? And the second is, what should the zoning of the property be? So if they make those decisions and they say, yeah, we think it's an appropriate time to annex the property, we think the zoning is correct, we negotiate an annexation agreement and publish the annexation ordinance that brings the property into the city. At that point, the subdivision's approved. The subdivision is not an item that goes directly to council. So they've not looked at the subdivision. The level of detail involved in subdivision approval really isn't germane to the discussion about whether or not it's the right time to annex a piece of property. It's not really germane to the question of what's the appropriate zoning. So those items really aren't items that are germane or to be spoken about at the council meeting. They're human, you're human, we're all curious and we want to know more about what's going on with a project. You will hear me on occasion say, now we're getting a bit out of bounds. We all do that. That's human nature. And I think that's part of what Commissioner Luttrop was saying on the council that evening. This request is very similar to that. What you're saying is a request for zoning in conjunction with annexation as well as a special use permit. So if you assume that both of those are approved tonight, what happens is the annexation request goes to council. They make a decision on whether or not it's the appropriate time to annex the property and whether or not the zoning is appropriate. They would not look at the special use permit piece of that unless that is independently appealed. They would then look at that. If they decide that it shouldn't be annexed at this point, the that's the end of it. It's not in the city. The special use permit is not approved at that point, and it goes away. If they do approve it, we go through the same process. We negotiate an annexation agreement. We bring that back to council, then we ultimately publish the ordinance annexing the property. That's, like, again, that's been our process for at least 12 years, and much longer than that. We can certainly change that process, but that's the process we have now, and so that's the process that you're stuck with. If the commission wants to change that in the future, that's a discussion we can have, but it really doesn't come into play tonight.
Let me see if I understand this correctly. So we had did something with the property, the zoning and so forth, and the council thought that it might be beneficial, they didn't take a vote on it, but they just general discussion, might be beneficial, that in the annexation agreement, they should negotiate something with the property owner to provide certain open space. And they were advised that they couldn't do that without overturning something we had already done. It seems to me that that's should we be in a process where the council has to overturn us when they are going through an annexation, which is under their total control? I mean, the process may be something we've followed for 12 years now, but it still doesn't make sense to me, and it seems like we're putting them in a very bad position.
Again, that's really not the item that's up for debate tonight. That's a process question. For tonight, you're really weighing the application versus the adopted findings. That's
the second part of the
relevant piece of your inquiry tonight.
But the second part is the special use, is it not?
Certainly, yes. So
So
you're
can
you're making a recommendation to council on what the appropriate zoning should be on the property.
Okay.
Independent of that, you're making a decision on whether or not the special use permit criteria can be met.
So let me speculate. If we refuse a special use permit, does that harm the applicant? Does that preclude them for a year to come back to us?
You have to go down. So.
I can't speculate on whether it harms them. My guess is the applicant can speak to that and
Not harm,
but
for the process. If we denied the special use, would that cause them to have to wait a year to reapproach us for special use if they so desired?
if it's the exact same application for the exact same development, yes, unless it was a denial without prejudice. If it's a straight-up denial and they come back with the exact same application, they'd have to wait for a year.
Or if it's denial without prejudice, like we did the Forest Service, they can come back right after the annexation or any other time. Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Okay, so on, I'll just say real quick here on public hearings, the applicant has up to 30 minutes if they need it to make their presentation. And if you're in the audience here and would like to make some comments on this particular hearing, you need to have signed up on one of the sign-up sheets back by that table back there. And the members of the public have 5 minutes, and then at the end, there would be up to 10 minutes for rebuttal from the applicant. So I think you must be the applicant.
I am.
You can state your name and address there.
My name is Ray Kimball, and my address is 2528 North Sullivan, Spokane Valley.
Okay, Ray, and then raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give tonight will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay.
All right. First off, wow, it's been a long time since I've been here. I think the last time I gave a presentation, it was up over there in the other building.
How long?
It has been. It's been a long, new faces, some familiar faces. But hey, I'm back. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's always a good thing. I like being here. First off, I think staff did a great job presenting it. I do appreciate from the water and sewer perspective that the respective water and sewer departments have kind of put us on notice that, hey guys, there's sewer lines out front and there's water lines out front, but that doesn't mean if you build a matchstick factory out there that we're going to be okay for fire flow or something like that. And we really appreciate that, and we'll definitely be working with staff to make sure that whatever development happens there is going to meet the city requirements. And so it's great. We have a big sewer main right out front, 15-inch. We've got water out front. We do recognize we're going to have to bring some, maybe even bring some larger lines across the road. We do also have some street improvements that we know we're going to have to do on our frontage. And we're very well aware of that. And that's kind of a standard operating procedure in this business. So, and we appreciate staff kind of putting us on notice early. It's always great not to have those surprises later on down the line where you get you get that staff report that says, yeah, there's sewer out front, and then you find out that it's at 90% capacity. So we really appreciate that, and so thank you very much to staff. So yes, we are here tonight for two things. First is the annexation and zoning, and second is the special use permit. So I'll kind of shoot. I think it's kind of, my presentation will probably get a little bit mixed in between here because they are kind of part and parcel, at least in my mind. I know from a decision standpoint, they're really not, so I'll try to keep them as separate as possible and hit the C-17 annexation first. I think I'll just kind of go through and talk about just a little bit on of the topography of the site. And, of course, as many of us know, this was part of a much larger mill complex. This was the office building, and shoot, I think for as long as I've been alive, it's gone through probably 5 different ownerships, mill-wise. And of course, it is now completely defunct. It's not even a log yard anymore. As you can see, you can actually see some of the logs here in this photo, which is actually kind of neat. And the building here is now gone. And of course, all of this concrete is torn up and ground up into nice big piles, and it's been cleaned up. But that's not really germane to this. What is germane is this parcel here that we are annexing. And so what it is, it kind of sits up here in this big flat area right up here on top of this little knob. And then there's probably about a 35 or a 40-foot slope down to the big flat area where the mill used to be. So this kind of sits nice and high right above here. The trees are pretty much right at the top of the slope, and then it drops down to the bottom. To give you kind of an idea of, if you can kind of imagine in your mind's eye there, what the topography is like. So if you can kind of put yourself there and turn yourself around and look, you've got this nice little view of the river and the Blackwell Hill there. Very, very pretty, great views. And interestingly enough, as I was driving in tonight from the office over in Spokane Valley, I thought to myself, I wanted to make sure that we weren't obstructing any views and vistas if we were going to put in, what we were proposing to put in. And the one good thing is, and I'll kind of go to, is that you can't even see the site from Interstate 90. And the second thing is right here in this area right here, this is actually all right-of-way, this area right here. And we have these great big mature ponderosa pines in there that are actually, I think they're 70 or 80 feet tall right in there. So, and those ponderosa pines, those are in the right-of-way. Those are city trees. And so we definitely have no plans to alter any of that.
How high are those trees?
I think they're 70 or 80 feet. They are big trees. They're very
how high is your facility going to be?
We're proposing 63.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess I'll kind of go to I'll go back here to, maybe I went the wrong way. I did go the wrong way. So I want to go to the zoning map and talk a little bit about the appropriate zoning. So as you can see here, this is generalized land use. We have commercial pretty much all around to the north of us anyway. And we have county vacant industrial, old log yard stuff to the south, east, and west. From a zoning standpoint, I think the reason we chose C-17 is when we looked at it, we looked at, all the uses that are the potential for it. We looked at the red on the map and decided that coloring a little bit more of that map red in this spot made a heck of a lot of sense. So, a heck of a lot of uses we can do. And so as we went through the comprehensive plan, we started going through and making sure that zoning this C-17 did meet the comprehensive plan, met the goals of the comprehensive plan, met the goals of the river district and the transition area. And we found that it did. And in our application and in our narrative, we talk about the comprehensive plan, the goals, and how we believe that we meet those goals with this annexation. So now, so we do believe, as we look at this is kind of a little bit of a hole, so to speak, that probably, as an annexation goes, it's a hole that probably should be filled in the city of Coeur d'Alene. Now, what color should that hole be, so to speak? And as we look at the map, I think the C-17 is absolutely the most appropriate. It sits right on an arterial. It's not the right size for anything other than some sort of commercial or a C-17 type of zoning, and the uses that a C-17 zoning allows. So, I mean, if you looked at it as R1, anything like that, is that appropriate? Well, not really. It's not. And so you look at it, and I think C-17 is the most appropriate, and definitely something that gives the developer and the owner the flexibility to do a lot of different things, which pretty much leads us to, we started thinking about, all right, what are we going to do on this property? What did the developer, so I'm going to kind of jump into the second part of this here, the special use permit. So what does the developer want to do? And what do they, what is their vision for this property? And so the developer came to us and said, we've got this building that we'd like to do. And I'm going to apologize for that, because that is dark. That looks like Batman lives there. But I will maybe refer you, hopefully, to your packet. It should have a little bit better looking. I think all the detail kind of blended into one big black blob there. So what I'll do is I'll direct you to this slide and just kind of go over the concept. So the concept of this building is an apartment building. It's a 5-story apartment building. It's got 2 wings separated by a little office area, workout facility. And the idea behind it is that it's interior corridor apartments. This is something that the city of Coeur d'Alene hasn't had. Now we've got some interior corridor type buildings in the downtown area here, but those aren't apartments. They're not apartment living. So what this does is this is going to allow for a 5-story building, but in order to get parking for a 5-story building, in order to maximize the use of the site and not create an ocean of asphalt and cars, the thing that we looked at was, well, let's look at the economics of it all. And so if we go with a higher density, then what we can do is, instead of taking all the parking for, let's say, a C-17 apartment use, and scatter that all the way across and get rid of all those trees and cut them all down, what we can do is we can take the economics of higher density and stack the units, get 5 stories, and then what we can do is that gives us enough economic value in the building to go underneath in a garage setting. So we can go 2 floors underneath and have covered parking, completely covered garage parking underneath. And so that's what we did, is we got kind of creative. And so we've got an access right here, which is a right-in, right-out access that comes in off of Celtice Way, comes into the very, very bottom level, which kind of has a little bit of a, and then we come out here, which this one here comes into the upper level of the parking. So it just kind of drops down and you go into the parking garage. And so in the parking garage, it's kind of nice. I mean, imagine you're, I kind of like to imagine myself, just out of college, just got a job, and all right, don't have enough money to buy a house yet, but I have to have a nice place, and I want to live in Coeur d'Alene. And so what would I do? Well, what kind of an apartment would I like to be in? Well, this is a great location. It's one of those where I can park my car in a secure garage where people coming in and out isn't going to happen, not going to be a parking lot for someone to come in and break into my car. I can walk, in the wintertime, I can just walk right over, I don't get rained on, dragging my groceries in and out, or into my house and into my apartment. I go over to the elevator, hit my floor, go up. I'm there in the mornings, wake up, walk down the hallway, go down the elevator, maybe stop down in the lobby area. Maybe there's a coffee shop there, a little coffee kiosk or something there, and I get a mocha, go down, and drive to work. It's kind of one of these really cool little things. And the other thing about this is that this apartment, and having that value and being able to have a little conference center, the workout facility right there, and also having all of the density in one spot, having all the parking underneath the building, or the vast majority of the parking underneath the building, that gives us the opportunity to open up the rest of it for open space and leave larger chunks of the property for open space. Have a community garden, spot for a little community garden, a little sports court, play area. One of the important things here for this development is actually trail access, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about, is that trail access along Celtice Way over to the Prairie Trail is really, really important. And, the city of Coeur d'Alene has done a fantastic job with this trail system. The Prairie Trail, the Centennial Trail, all of the trail system is just fantastic. It connects subdivisions, it connects houses into, to the Kroc Center, to downtown, to Riverstone. It's a fantastic system. And this right here, and one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we connect into that trail system, because the idea here is kind of is to take this apartment and create kind of a healthy living. Got a sport court out there, got a playground for the kids. You can, wake up on a Saturday morning, hop on the bike and cruise on down to Riverstone and get a movie or stop at Starbucks or whatever you want. It's in a great location for that. And that was one of the things I kind of wanted to touch on, because as we go through the findings here, that one of the findings says that in order for this R34 density, it's got to be in close proximity to an arterial. Well, it is. It's right on an arterial. With regards to the transportation stuff, we'll work everything out with Gordon. We don't have any problems with that. We've talked to him about it, and that's a great thing. But being in close proximity to shopping, schools, and park areas, well, we're going to have a little bit of a kind of a park area here in the green space that's afforded to us by having the underground parking and not having an ocean of asphalt out there. But the other thing it does is that the important thing is getting that trail connectivity over to the Prairie Trail, so that there is pedestrian access to the Kroc Center just right there, to the park in Riverstone, to all of these great amenities that are in the area. And so I think that's a very important thing, and that's an important point to make, is that we are in close proximity, and it's very important for us to create that pedestrian connectivity. And then, so I think I kind of talked myself out of everything to talk about, really. I think what I'd like to do is of course ask for you to recommend approval for annexation and zoning of C-17 and adopting findings B8 through B11 in the staff report, and also find that the R34 special use permit is appropriate, and adopt findings B8A through B8C and approve the special use permit. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions you have.
Okay, hold on, because we probably have some questions. So, looks like John is first, and then Commissioner Bowlby, and then Commissioner Ward.
Ray, as I studied this packet, a couple of things that jumped out. One was the sewer and the sewer capacity. I think Gordon touched on that, and you spoke to it well. There's still some work to be done to decipher whether there's truly the capacity to support this in its size. Mm-hmm. And you understand that. I thought I heard you say that you've read Gordon's evaluation of the traffic right in, left to the next crossover, and then to make the west for westbound traffic, and you're okay with all that?
Yep. Well, Gordon and us, well, we've worked through all kinds of traffic stuff, and that's not a problem.
The one thing, and I'd like to hear what some others up here have to say about where I'm going to go next, which is, the R34 wrinkle with this. Where I struggle a little bit, I guess I always thought that whole mill site would come in together, and, it's not, and we can't maybe control that. So the struggle would be, we have to make this finding B8B that says that, the R34 would be compatible with the surrounding area, and 3 sides of this surrounding area are county industrial, which to me is a big question mark, see? So, I could brainstorm whatever things could happen there into the future. It either comes into the city later and likely becomes C-17, and it's Bardnays and things of that nature, and who knows what. Or somebody develops something in the county, in county industrial, right next to this new R34 beautiful building that you described, and then we have an incompatibility. And I guess I flash back to, there's a little bit of heartburn, and I don't know that it really materialized, where the Meadow Ranch subdivision came along next to the already existing commercial, and the existing commercial people were fearful that it could be an encroachment kind of thing that could drive a future incompatibility. So you talked about topography. I mean, what's the level of confidence that we struggle with up here, I guess, in knowing that these future developments on 3 sides are not going to bring about something that's going to conflict with this, with the people that live in this place?
Sure. I can sort of address that. One of the good things about being on this side of the podium is that I get to do a lot of work in a lot of different jurisdictions, Kootenai County being one of them. I can tell you with all likelihood, industrial development as allowed by county code in that area, given the price tag, number one, of the property, and number two, given how difficult industrial development is to get approved in the county, because when you look at it, it's a use, but if you look at the county code, there are very few things that are outright allowed in industrial zoning that don't require things like water and sewer. And that's 2 things that this site doesn't have. Now, water, of course, they could probably drill a well. Sewer, that's a big problem. So, and that was always a problem when it was a mill site, is that it had drain fields. And, of course, those were always grandfathered in, but now they're gone. And so it doesn't have that ability anymore. So, essentially, from a development standpoint, especially from an industrial standpoint, I don't think it'll ever develop as industrial. I don't think the county will ever change the zoning on it because it's within the city of Coeur d'Alene area city impact. And so really, if it's going to do anything, it's going to come into the city, just from a practical standpoint. Now, I can't say for sure that, and that, it'll never, ever develop as anything. But for the longest time, it's industrial, and now it's, now it's piles of ground up concrete.
Do you have any more questions? Ray, I'd like to follow up on what was just stated. I know in the old days, I could go back to that, we would...
I remember those.
Yes, we would talk about this type of parcel as a little bit of spot zoning, meaning because that we don't have any contiguous except across from the arterial. And it was pretty difficult. It's kind of like you're an island. And I know when we were discussing the River District and the zoning of the River District and its potentialities, I had concern with all of it becoming commercial. And I'll tell you why I have concern on all of it becoming commercial. Mainly, it is our highest density. You can do anything in commercial. That sits with the land. And we in Coeur d'Alene with individuals who come and give us seminars and talk with us, always say, you really have a lot of commercial as we stand right now. So that was always something that stuck in my head. And not that this parcel doesn't lend itself to being commercial, I'm not saying. And I'm looking at your project. I like the idea of the parking the way you're looking at it. I don't know how much outside parking you have. It looks like I was trying to count 40 parking spots outside, something like that.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
About that, yeah. 48,
And you're
I
looking
think,
at
48 or 50.
131 apartments?
Correct.
And the average size of those would be what?
We've got 2 parking stalls per.
Per person?
Per.
But
yeah,
I mean,
per parking.
size-wise, there'll be large apartments, potentially, varying
They're gonna have-
sizes.
Yeah, it'll be a cross-section, I'm sure.
And then you're looking at parks. So I'm looking at this project. The 5 stories is a little wrinkle for me, and the higher density is a little wrinkle. Because we have quite a bit of apartment building right now at Riverstone. I think your idea, though, and your dream, it doesn't look unappealing by any means. But
Appreciate that.
we really have to really think about the spot zoning for me and the direction we're going. And in many of these type of developments, when in fact we annexed, and I don't know if staff has talked about this, but when there was a question with adequate hookup for sewer and water, the developers usually would step up and say, we're going to pay for adequate sewer and water.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of what was presented. And that usually would come into what we're talking about right now. It was discussed, and the developer said, whatever I have to do to be able to do this, even though I know I'm a distance away from the contiguous line of the city limits, I will take care of the need for my project. And that might mean going all the way to Riverstone to pull a line out. And I can't remember which project we had, but that was a condition.
Sure. And
I just guess what we just discussed with the sewer and the water, although it will be taken care of, it's so much easier if we know firm, and if we're sending this off to the city council, so we don't come up with what Mr. Lutrip talked about. And they're comfortable with the direction we're going with planning. These are just some things that have gone through me, and I agree with Commissioner Ingalls, and it is a concern, just all of that information that
Sure.
we're talking about.
Sure. And I think it kind of goes, maybe it goes a little unspoken, maybe we're kind of glossing over it a little bit too much. I appreciate what Gordon said.
Right.
And that, it has been the standard for every annexation, for every development project, that development pays for development.
Right.
And if there's any oversizing, then we talk about that and we negotiate that, and that's all the stuff that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely, I think that's kind of the unwritten thing, and we'd be fine with any sort of a condition of approval that said,
Okay.
that.
Whatever standards needed to be taken care of, that would be
Correct.
part
Yeah,
and parcel of
whatever's needed.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
and
I have a quick
You got a
question
comment,
too.
yeah.
Ray, I heard you make a comment about the value of this location, this project, this idea, and you brought up connectivity to the Prairie Trail or the Centennial Trail. I'm curious, looking at that map and perhaps even a zoning map, any of the zoning maps that we've been looking at, how will that connection happen? I mean, how can that actually get over to the Prairie Trail, because it's going along either
Sure.
southeast
Yeah, absolutely.
county property?
I can address that, and I'll also introduce my companion here, Todd. It will go along Celtics Way within the right-of-way. So, and we've had discussions with the staff and talked about it. We can get and drop it right in and connect it right on that side of Celtics Way.
So is that gray?
That gray line there,
Squiggly line, would that be?
that represents
a
the
trail.
trail connectivity, correct?
Okay. But would it end where that property ends? Does it end-
No, there's a little arrow there and some words that you can't read that says to Prairie Trail.
Oh.
So, and this is Todd. He'd like to address a couple
so,
things.
Hi, I'm Todd Whipple. How are you? And
Uh,
Ray did not
Todd,
introduce
no.
it. He came with
Todd,
anybody.
really briefly here. I just need you to state your name and address there for the record, and then I'll swear you in.
Okay. My name is Todd Whipple, and I'm 2528 North Sullivan Road, Spokane Valley, Washington, 99216.
Okay, and you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay.
Ray didn't introduce me. I was here, and I came to listen. I did want to testify. I signed up. I didn't want to be one of the commenters. I could have been. A couple things I wanted to let you know to make sure that Ray spoke correctly is that we do understand that utility extension, correctness, size, and capacity are our responsibility in this location. We've had those meetings with Gordon. I thought he did a pretty good job. I don't know if he went so far as to say that it is the developer's responsibility to make sure that that happens, to answer your question more succinctly. As we proposed this, or as we talked with the owner, we have actually had follow-up conversations with LCDC as it relates to the potential for looking at the completion of the south side of Celtis, especially as it relates to the road prism, and pedestrian connectivity or bicycle connectivity for intermodal transportation opportunities between this facility and also the River Point area, because that's kind of an opportunity to go down there. You can get on the trail system that starts from there. And so we have been pursuing a lot of other options associated with the extension of these trails, sidewalks, and opportunities. So on our frontage, obviously, we would do what would be necessary for our frontage improvements. But as it relates to connectivity, we're pursuing other options to construct, and with LCDC to construct the item and possibly get paid back, or whatever that happens to be as it relates to a larger public improvement that would benefit the entire area. To answer your question specifically, we show 48 car parks. What I was going to talk about was the R34 issue that was kind of raised earlier, and I wanted to kind of put it in perspective. It's a small piece of property. It's 3.85 acres. It sits above the county industrial land, while the two-story parking garage the lower story would be at or near that level. If it's industrial and they look at our cars, we don't really care. So from that perspective, the advantage of the 5-story building, what it does is it gives us a similar or smaller footprint than 324-unit Woody Walkups would. So if you think about it, staff indicated that we could get 67 apartment units on this at C17. If we didn't ask for the R34, our building footprint would be nearly the same as what we're presenting for 130 units. Our parking footprint would be almost 3 times. So we show 48 units of outside parking that aren't inside the building, but if we had done, let's say, 67 apartments, the standard thinking is you have to park at least 2. So you're at 140 to 150 outside car parks. You lose the outside amenities. And with 3 buildings, you may or may not get a clubhouse or a clubhouse facility. You lose some of the additional amenities. And so what this really was an opportunity to provide a unique living environment in the city of Coeur d'Alene where one doesn't currently exist, which we think there'd be an excellent demand for. And second, to minimize our footprint on the property to maximize visibility and amenities to the people who might live here. So we took a lot of those things into consideration. So as you consider the R34 and why we maybe presented it this way, it's allowed under the code, as I think was stated earlier, but also to let you know that we really thought about it. We're trying to provide a opportunity that doesn't exist right now in the city of Coeur d'Alene, which would be Riverview, South Bank view from an inside corridor rental facility, underground parking, which is a level of security that doesn't exist, and then minimize surface parking so that we can maximize outside amenities. Other than that, I think Ray did a great job. There were just a few of those things that I had meetings with LCDC and some other things that I have participated with directly with the owner that Ray wasn't at those meetings. And so I wanted to make sure that you knew that, utility extensions are absolutely, we understand the responsibility there. And to kind of help you view this site plan and think of what 3 70 by 180-foot buildings along with 145 car parks would look like, it would be totally different, and in many ways I think it would be unappealing. So we do ask for the R34. I understand your question, your questions and your concerns, but in this instance, this piece of property with a specific topography sets up very well. So at that point, I will take a step back and let you continue asking Ray questions.
Okay, you have another question, Peter?
Well, just my first series of questions. I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The access.
I lost track of who had asked questions, sorry.
Well, I don't, I'm trying not to talk too much, but that's finding that hard. So your access to the Prairie Trail will be existing streets unless you get funding from LCDC?
That's not necessarily correct, no.
Well, could you explain your access to Prairie
guess I
Trail
should.
absent LCDC?
Okay, so as most people in an LCDC area, you always want to pursue that opportunity if there's an option there.
Which this isn't, I don't think, in the LCDC area.
Actually, there is a weird corridor in there. I don't have my LCDC map with me.
But anyway.
But regardless, it would be something that we would pursue with the city to try to work out a solution to connect the path. If not, the answer would be for bicycles, it would be on the street. And for pedestrians, it would be with whatever the trail is. Now, that doesn't mean we won't work with the city to put like a 6-foot asphalt path so that we can get to the bridge and can get over the bridge and get into Riverstone so we can get onto the trail system. I don't think we looked at the topography. I don't think there's a lot of opportunity for us to dive down to the trail from the east side of the trail. You might be able to get there. I think you've got to pretty much enter into the Riverstone community and access the trail there. So we've looked at a lot of different options at this point. It's very desirous of us to make the connection. I would hope that we could find a little cooperation through LCDC maybe and find some opportunity there, but if not, it's something we're definitely going to pursue with the city. So, and I think we've even talked to Gordon about it to some degree.
Secondly, is this apartment house going to be seniors only?
No.
Did I see something in the report about if it was seniors, they wouldn't have to have certain requirements that they would if, okay, that was someplace else.
Oh, that was one of your
Okay,
conditions.
thank you. So,
we didn't.
And finally, we talked about signalization.
That's on
And we
Okay.
talked about all the, the approval of the traffic flow and everything, which includes the signalization, and you're bearing a cost of that.
Sure.
You're
We
all in
yes,
agreement
sir.
with that?
We do. We have a copy of the Washington Trust Bank annexation. We understand their requirement for some participation in signalization. We've met with the city. We're trying to make some minor modifications to that for some other reasons. We do understand and accept our proportionate share of participating in the signal at Atlas. We know that's a big issue. We've had several meetings with staff about that signal, and so that is not a... We expected that condition since how we saw that it was in the Washington Trust Bank condition.
And has Washington Mutual annexed, has their property annexed to the city yet?
Yes.
Yes, that property is in the city.
And is that on our map here?
No.
Not that map, it is in the city boundaries.
Well, the one map Commissioner Bill, we talked about spot zoning. I had a question about spot annexation.
No, it meets the requirements for annexation, and it's not a spot zone.
Where
My term.
Where is, I didn't know if there was a term of
Yeah,
spot
for
zoning, but it's
annexation, it
sitting out
has
in
to
the middle
be
of-
adjacent or contiguous to the city limits. This property is.
It's contiguous because because of the Celtice Way and right away. Okay, where is the Washington Mutual property?
It's right here.
Washington Trust.
That
Washington
little
Trust
line
is
right
here.
down there?
Correct. This is C-17 and this is R-12.
It may meet the needs of the requirements of the city for annexation because it's contiguous. It just seems to me, though, it's sitting out there by itself. And you go through here and what the vision was for this industrial property that has been reclaimed and rehabilitated and decontaminated and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of effort that's gone into that and will continue to go into that. And then to see an item sticking right in the middle with a large complex of 62 feet, which is higher than the other C-17 properties we have, just doesn't seem to me to fit in. It doesn't seem to me to meet the different criteria that we had talked about, that Tammy had captured from our Spokane River District tomorrow and so forth. It just doesn't seem to be suitable. But, you know, we're not done with our discussion yet. I'm just giving you my first salvo.
I think you know, one of the things that you're working your way through is the demise of the Chesron vision.
Is what, sir?
The demise of the Chesron vision. You know, one time they had an annexation application ready to go for all of this and withdrew it. And they had a different vision for this area that was maybe real or unrealistic. And what happened after that fell apart was that the Washington Trust Bank wound up with a piece of it. Stimson wound up with a piece of it. Our client wound up with this piece and also another piece down along, what's that road? Down
Bella Reef.
Bella Reef. And so we have 11 lots down along Bella Reef. And so I think Ray spoke to this earlier. You know, the only issue with the remainder Stimson parcel is the leavings pile. You know, it's about 40 feet tall. That's how tall it is. So in relation to our building, it's almost as tall as the building that we're proposing. And it has very little, I mean, I've seen geotech reports on it. It has really no buildable, there's nothing buildable or suitable in it for construction. So it is truly waste material. There's bark, there's dirt, there's gravel. But to screen it, to make it profitable to use it, you can't really use it on site because it's not adequate fill material. You'll never get compaction out of it. It's just a big pile of dirt. And so we recognize going in, I think there was a question about risk. Development's all about risk. And one of the advantages of having a combined process is it helps our risk as it relates to the timeline. You know, one of the advantages that we have because of the way the City of Coeur d'Alene does your process is if both processes go forward approved to City Council, it moves our timeline up to this fall. We don't lose a year. Regardless of the questions if you deny with or without prejudice, you know, we don't lose a month, we don't lose 2 months, and since we're here in April, we are in a process-oriented position where it would facilitate the start of construction and the big foundation that would have to go in this fall still. So it is timely for us, and it is important that you know, we do ask that you move them together. Not that I don't understand the questions that you might have, but and I actually understood your argument, but in this instance, we have made that application, so we do ask that you move them forward. I have been doing this for a long time. Ray said it was a long time since he's been in front of Planning Commission. Heck, last time I was here was for Coeur d'Alene Place. Figure that out. I think that was 95. Or Gordon and I were comparing notes, 94 or 95, so it's been that long. And then we were checking, I was like, well, it's a good thing they didn't ask that sewer question. We did Coeur d'Alene Place. We didn't even know we were going to put an 18-inch line in Kathleen back then. So, I mean, it's just kind of, that kind of stuff just goes with annexation and development. So, but we've tried in this process to get to R34 really hard to bring you a project that you would find compelling and compatible with a future direction for this area. And we think that this building, the way that it's situated, the way it's planned, is going to work whatever the future development is. We think that the remainder property will probably develop or be asked during annexation to come in real similar to the Washington Trust Bank property, which would be to bring R12 in along the river. Unfortunately, I have a problem with estate lots along the river because it takes some of the people away from the opportunity to get down there unless you walk on the boardwalk. And then C-17 or some other common type of zoning. I think there's a real need for multifamily. They wouldn't be doing it. I mean, it's market driven. You know, if there's no vacancies, they're not building nothing. if there's lots of vacancies, nobody's building anything. If there's no vacancies, they're going to build until there are lots of vacancies. So, anyway.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that it? All right. Okay, so we'll take public testimony now. I have Rita Sims Snyder. Just come on up, state your name and address.
Rita Sims Snyder. Residence is in Coeur d'Alene. Business is on 2745 Celtice Way, directly across the street from this parcel and this change request.
Okay.
I'm really
and
disappointed to see...
One quick thing.
Sure.
I need you to raise your right hand so I can, okay. I know you tell the truth anyway, but I still need to do this. Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm really disappointed the map is quite old. It's over 6 years old. The map that's showing isn't showing our new building that went up, which will be 6 years in September. And we have 53 employees. We've been at this location since 1971. Okay. We are commercial. This piece of property in question is surrounded by commercial or industrial, to the east, to the west, and to the north. I truly do not believe a high-density residential in this Trillia spot zoning is compatible with this particular area. And we have a automobile dealership which has very bright lights. They're on all night long. We have an outdoor paging system. We have semi-trucks that deliver trucks in the middle of the night. And we've been there for a very long time. We know exactly the kind of traffic and the kind of changes that have come along Celtice Way. Nobody is more pleased than we are to see Celtice develop. We are thrilled to see Celtice develop. There are many parts of it that are much better than it was in years past. But it's very important as we go and look at the different areas along Celtice Way that the area that we are in is very commercial. We've got 2 new hotels. We've got the entrance to Riverstone on the north side. We have the U.S. Bank Call Center. We have the Cairo Ice Arena. We have the Convalescent Center. They're all commercial-type properties. And then they lead into what's becoming, in one spot in Riverstone and further down on Celtice Way, some very dense residential. In a 1.3-mile section, there are right now over 500 new apartments. That does not include the single-family homes. Half of those apartments are subsidized. Okay. I also find it interesting that they're speaking to LCDC. To my knowledge, looking at the map, this is not in an urban rural district. So unless they've done some kind of shoestringing over to this parcel, I'm not aware that even if this is annexed, that it's in a district to get urban and rural funds to help them. We're concerned about a 5-story complex directly across the street merely because it's not compatible with the zoning that's there. Not that we think that it's not going to be a nice property there. But we do want to protect and encourage business development along this corridor. And if we take this one spot and put high-density residential, how will they develop the rest of that property around it as we feel it should be developed in something that's more compatible with what is there and has been for some time? I have a couple questions that I don't know if we'll know tonight, is that could this also be another property that's going to be a subsidized property? Is Rivers Edge Apartments LLC the developer and the owner? I mean, and just because you see a conceptual plan, that doesn't mean that's the plan that we will see in the end, as we know. And then a little bit about the additional traffic on Celtice Way and some of the things that are happening along that area. We got a notice for this, but this hearing wasn't on any calendar that we saw. And I'm not sure enough of an area was notified because this affects a much larger area. The people that live down in Mill River, their little park down there is being inundated in the summer. With all the new concentration of housing that's gone along that area, the people are parking clear up into the neighborhoods to go down there and use that small park. And I think you are very correct in assessing that there's very little park areas that have been added along that whole area to kind of give a break to some of those areas that are already there. So as a business that's been there for 40 years, what we see is happening down Celtics Way is the only way we have to control it is with zoning. We don't know what it's going to look like in 5 to 10 years. And then there's been many cases that we wished we'd had a little bit more forethought in thinking about zoning changes to see what happens in that 5 to 10 years. We don't know how all of these apartments that are going in, there's a huge glut of housing going along the area. What's it going to look like in 5 years? How's it going to be maintained? What's the occupancy going to be? You know, the market for real estate is very elastic. And when the economy was down and there was such a need for more affordable housing, then they started building all these apartments. Are we going to need it going forward into the future? We don't know that. So that's just our concern. And so we would ask that you would please stop, not approve this. We need to step back and look at this area really more thoroughly before we make a change like that to an area that's really commercial. So that's all I have. But I do have a couple other comments I'd like to make that's not directly related to this. They took a lot of extra time, so I'm going to take an extra 30 seconds. We are the only business along Celtice Way that has been required to put in a sidewalk in over 40 years. 750 feet of sidewalk. The hotels, the convalescence center, the U.S. Bank, the new medical facility off of Celtice Way, not one of those put in sidewalks. We're seeing a huge increase in pedestrian traffic. We have people walking down to Riverstone. We have employees walking from the parking facility in Riverstone over to work at the hotels. Last winter, there was a person in a wheelchair from the convalescence center out on Celtice Way. The area in front of the hotels has no shoulder at all. Not shoulder. There's not even 3 feet. And so as we look at this development along Celtice Way, I'm going to ask you, you have to be very cognizant of this. It's a huge pedestrian corridor. I'm seeing a lot of bicycles. They don't all use the trail because it's not easily accessible from every area. But we have to have sidewalks down that area. So.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question.
Hold on a minute before you leave.
You said you
Go
spoke,
ahead.
you're speaking against this. Against what? The annexation?
The annexation and the zoning request, yes.
The C-17 or the special use?
I think it's a special use. C-17, I think, would work with this area because that is what is there now. And I think that is much more conducive. But with that, I cannot support the higher density residential special use.
Thank you very much.
So.
Any other questions? Rita, can I ask you a quick question? What's your concern about the apartment building? Is it that if there's residents there, they'd complain about the lights and the noise at your business, or?
Yeah, it's kind of like people that move next to the airport and complain about the planes. So
Right.
it's a lot of light. We do have an outdoor paging system, like I said, which goes 7 days a week. We do get a lot of our deliveries are made at night from big semi trucks. And I just think that we're losing a mixed-use commercial area along that corridor. It's becoming very high-density residential, which the traffic is great. Don't get me wrong. We love to see the traffic, and we love to see these new projects going up and down Celtice Way. But along our area, it's commercial. And like I said, a continuation of hotels and those kind of things, I think, is much more conducive to that area than a small area of high-density housing, which is going to limit what else might want to go in conjunction with that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else that wants, oh, okay, come on up.
I'm sorry I didn't sign up.
They'll probably give you one to sign there at some point.
My apologies. As I said, I'm commuting between here and someplace else and don't have enough time to go through everything. Susie Snedeker, City of Coeur d'Alene.
And Susie, do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay.
I want to, Rita spoke well, and certainly from a vantage point of being involved in property across the street, I want to address the special use permit, and I do have a copy of the elevation. I want to cite one thing. When Ray was speaking, if I understood him correctly, he said that the parcel was 35 feet above, to the south, it was 35 feet above the existing lower property. And this is kind of on a knoll. And if my math is correct, and at this point I don't know if anything's correct, but that's almost 100 feet high. So you may not see it you think about 100 feet, you may not see 100 feet from the highway, from I-90, but you're going to see it everywhere else. And my objection is to the bulk and scale of the building and the proposed building with this extended height. Whether or not, as we all know, it is not written in stone that they take this very large, in my opinion, building. I don't think AI is going to be sending out awards for this one either, but it's not written in stone that they stay with this footprint. My concern is that it is totally out of scale with anything else along Saltese, and for that matter, there's some other areas of the city where I don't think that this would fit in either. There's some other issues that are going to have to be addressed by a building that's this large. But let me go back and cite from Tammy's recitation here. Good job, Tammy. On the characteristics of the Spokane River District, there are two things. Public access should be provided to the river, and I don't see that happening through the rest of this property. So it, to me, is spot zoning, even though Warren says it isn't. Probably right, Warren. I don't know. I still think view it as spot zoning. That the scale of development will be urban, page 7, that the scale of development will be urban in nature, promoting multimodal. It's connectivity to the downtown. It's all about the scale. To me, it's all about the scale of the development. And I think it's totally out of context with the surrounding area. Whether you go all the way down one direction or the other, you can go east or west. But I think it's so large, and think about 100 feet looming large from the river. Lovely. But in that note, I ask you to deny the special use permit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this hearing tonight? Okay, I guess not. You can come on up to rebuttal. State your name again for the record.
Rakenbull for the record?
Yeah.
Well, I think probably one of the most important things to talk about with regards to, let's just talk about the zoning, is C-17, as Commissioner Bowlby mentioned, is one of those broad brush type zones. And it is that is a C-17 corridor today for the most part. We do have some residential use see here in this area that was just approved, my understanding. But the one thing I want to really kind of point out is that because we do sit on this little plateau, so to speak, what we have is on the south side of Saltese Way, basically east of Atlas, there really isn't a whole lot of developable property other than this one piece. You know, as Mr. Whipple testified earlier, that this parcel right here, which is the old log yard, and it's full of dirt and trees and, you know, tree parts and bark and stuff that, you know, as the geotech report from years past indicated, it's completely unsuitable for development. It's not as if we're going to get some sort of a giant commercial corridor through there on Saltese Way. Additionally speaking, in talking with the city engineer, access, because of the fact that it is a median divided road, access points are pretty limited. And so we've taken the one part in this area here that's actually developable, and we've come up with something that we think is a very, very good use of that property. Now, with regards to the nuisances, so to speak, of commercial endeavors in the area, first and foremost, and I'm just going to go back to those right there. I don't know about you guys. I don't think lights are going to be a problem. We've got 80-foot trees right out in front that will block all lights. And for the most part, generally speaking, I believe city code says that all lights in parking lots need to be downward directed, not spotlighting the neighbor's property. So from that perspective, I don't think that any, like the painting facility or anything of that nature is really going to be any sort of a problem with this. I really just don't see it. We've got adequate existing screening. We're not talking about trees that we're going to plant this year and they're 2 inches around and they're 15 feet high, and in 50 years we're going to be talking, oh yeah, it's great screening. No, these are full-grown ponderosa pines in good health, and they provide screening today.
Is that on your property? Those
No,
trees?
those are in the right-of-way. So those are city trees. The other thing I wanted to address was the question about LCDC and where it is. The annexation itself does not exist within LCDC. It can't. But the right-of-way of Celtice Way does exist within the LCDC zone. Therefore, funding for a trail going to the Prairie Trail within the right-of-way is well within the jurisdiction. That's what we were talking about. So as a funding mechanism, as some way we can work with the city and LCDC in order to get that trail connectivity, which is important to us. It's a very important part of this. And so, I think Ms. Snedeker mentioned public access to the river. If you can find a way to get it, we'd love it. We'd love to provide some public access to the river if we own the property between us and the river. But we don't, and that's not really up for debate today. Hopefully, what we have done is provided access to the Prairie Trail, which gets us down to the river and down to areas that have access to the river. And, in conversations with city staff and the rails, the abandoned railroad, and hopefully, future development in that area will expand the Centennial Trail along the river there and provide a lot better access. And so from that perspective, we are trying our best, given the circumstances that we have, to actually try to get some sort of connectivity to we're looking over the river, and if you just take that little trail, you can probably get there. So, and that's what we're hoping to do. So, and with that, I'd answer any further questions you may have and urge you to approve this.
Mr. Ingles, do you have any questions?
I'm good.
Do you have any?
Well, I don't know yet. Go ahead.
I do. The bulk and scale has got me a little leery also. I can understand that. I do like the idea of what you're trying to do with your parking underground, and I do listen to the commercial which is going on across the way, and maybe not the lighting, but the noise. How far off of Celtice are you going to be? How many feet, you think?
About as far as we can get it. So we're actually kind of sliding it as far south. The building is as far to the south as we can get.
So what do you look at how many feet is that?
Give me just 1 second. I will get to that slide and try to give you an idea, because it does vary. But as you can see, so let's just look at this. These parking stalls are 20 feet long, 24-foot aisle, or actually 30-foot aisle, because that's a fire lane, and another 20 feet. So that's 70 feet, this right here. So this right here is the existing edge of pavement. We've got, and this is one of those weird things, is that Celtice Way is a huge right-of-way.
It is, yeah.
There's a lot there. And there's a lot of distance in between Celtice Way and our property line. And so we've got, I would venture to say, at least 70 feet for the road. From Celtice, from the actual paved surface, plus a setback of about 20 feet right there. And that just in that one corner over here, we're several hundred feet away.
Yeah, I was thinking, doing the math. Now,
So-
noise does travel, and I know that...
Noise does travel.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, we kind of all understand. And the one thing about this is that it's apartments. It's not necessarily a house where someone shows up and has ownership and then is coming in and saying, hey, I bought this house and now my property value is down because they're increasing traffic down the road. Actually, it's the guy that goes, man, I don't like the traffic. I'm going to not renew my lease.
Well, I have another question also. What do you think the percentage of your open space is that you have right there?
It's really deceptive. I know we're over 50%, or we're under 50% impervious. I can tell you that.
Impervious.
Impervious. So there's more than 50% trees and grass and shrubberies and whatnot. The purpose of doing the site plan the way we did is we wanted to, instead of making long strips of green stuff that doesn't really do anybody any good.
Right.
We wanted to kind of cluster everything. We pulled the building onto the hillside where we could utilize the natural terrain for the garage. And as you see here, we'll be planting some trees down here along the bottom. And unfortunately, I mean, that's kind of one of the things that on one side we've got these great big ponderosa pines. We will be planting some trees on the bottom side so that future generations will have some greenery on that side as well.
Well, and so the other question is that the site plan, the concept of we're not going to see what's there, the same of what you have. I can't say anything about saying to put that on with a special use permit. That is not in our purview. But that was mentioned. And, I'm just trying to get a feel for what really will happen here and how much open space you'll have. And
Sure, and let me speak to that, because the purpose of having this concept was to sit it on the hillside, so we were able to take advantage of, if we have, let's just say we have a as Todd put it, a 3-story woody walk-up, which is essentially just a flat slab. Well, you can't put that on a hillside. By going with this concept, we can utilize the ground that's encompassed in this slope by creating this sort of or by using the downstairs, the parking structure,
on the slope.
Utilizing that in the slope. So what it does is it gives us a lot more of the area that's, usable. I mean, when you look at this, let's just say we were to do a site plan with some, 3 or 4 regular apartment buildings, whatever it is. We'd have to put them all up on the flat area, and our green space would be the hillside.
Right.
And
I understand the concept. I mean, I can see that. It's,
So
the 5th floor is kind of bugging me because I can have a concept of 4 floors in most of the places that we have.
Sure.
And it's just that 5th floor, squeezing that in, putting 63 feet versus the 47. So I'm trying to grapple with that. I
Sure.
can see this. I'm
And-
not, it's just I'm grappling with the bulk scale.
Sure. And the one thing that, it's really kind of important here is that the bulk and scale of this is something that the trees in the area
Right.
are going to mask, so to speak. And that's an important concept. When we look out on the prairie and we see an apartment building going up and we see the little trees, the bulk and scale is a lot different because of the surrounding atmosphere. And I think in this case, the bulk and scale is something, one, we've kind of set it into the hillside, which is a good thing. And secondly, it is camouflaged by the trees, and it allows us to keep as much open space as possible, utilize as much of the site for usable open space. Have a community garden, have the sports court, have the children's play area. Maybe take some of we've got we're planning on having a little workout facility right in here. So maybe it takes some of the stress off of the park down the way, having the amenities right here, but also having access to those amenities is also a very important thing, and now having pedestrian access.
Right. And another question, too, was the sidewalking. There is, if the light goes on at Atlas, and you didn't mention the Centennial Trail, but the concept of having some kind of a bike path on the south end from your parcel to the light at Atlas would get you to the Centennial Trail.
From that perspective, I think probably it might be a little bit better to get it to the Prairie Trail and then go underneath.
Because it's too far.
because it's not necessarily too far, but I think it provides a little bit better connectivity.
Better safety.
Better
Absolutely.
safety, better connectivity. It gets us, instead of going out to and
That makes
putting
sense.
people out going to Post Falls, it puts them going into Riverstone and downtown Coeur d'Alene.
Okay. I was just thinking out loud on that one. But these are just, small questions, not necessarily to do, but to get a feel for the project. And I've heard the comments, and I'm cognizant of what the feelings are, but that's all I have.
Okay. Mike has a question.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan. Ray, I do have another quick question. So looking at that map, the subject property is what we see in yellow, correct?
Correct.
So all that area in pink or salmon, whatever color we want to call it, between the yellow and the paved portion of Celtice, which would be, that's the eastbound portion of Celtice that we kind of see at the very top of that map?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So in that buffered zone, that pink or, again, salmon, whatever color that is, that's where those 80-foot trees are? Is that what you're saying?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
So once onto the property, I can see conceptually there's other plants that...
And there are
trees
other
that you're
trees on the property.
already there.
Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of trees on the property. I do this every time. So, actually, maybe that shows it pretty well. So you can see that there are a plethora of trees on the property. There are some on this property line here. There's quite a few back over here in this side. And the goal is to keep as much there as possible.
Okay.
Always the goal when doing something like this isn't to cut down a 100-year-old tree in order to plant a 5-year-old tree. It's to leave those there and try to work around them as best as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I have a question for you. Are these anticipated to be market rate apartments or tax credit?
Market rate.
Okay, and then there's been a lot of discussion about getting some LCDC funding to build some access to the Prairie Trail and so forth. I have no idea if that would be approved by LCDC. I'm not even sure if that's something urban renewal dollars should be used for. But how important is that to your project? Let's say you don't get any urban renewal.
There are.
What do you plan
that
on
is
doing?
one of the mechanisms in which we've talked to the players, so to speak. There are other avenues out there. We've even talked to the city. There are large scale improvement plans for Celtice Way on the horizon within the city's capital improvement plan. And so we've talked about doing things with the city and cashing out some improvements so that all the stuff can be done at once and all in one scale, and then maybe taking some of that money and actually building the trail all the way down with some of that. We've talked to staff about that, and that's something that we will continue to work with staff on. It's a very important part for our project. It's important for the marketability of our project, because just having this here, the idea is to provide a pedestrian-centric, health-centric living place, with a workout facility, with a little bit of park, with a little, play structure, community garden, those kinds of things, and connect it to the city of Coeur d'Alene, to connect it with the commercial centers, the Bardenay area, the movie theater, and it doesn't do us from a sales standpoint any good to not look at that and not recognize that that's a very important part. So it's going to be more driven from our end, I think, probably than from the city's end, because it's such an important part of our project to provide that.
I guess that's what I'm asking. It may be your responsibility.
It may be, and like I said, the mechanism in which we do it, we want to make sure that we have, whatever mechanism is out there, we want to be able to utilize those, and so that's where we are.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Warren. I just have a legal question for you. Assuming this was approved, and you heard the concerns from the people across the street there, the car dealership, assuming this was approved, and it's a residential apartment building, is there any certain way that puts any more burden on the other commercial uses, whether it's a car dealership or whatever it is that has noise and lights and any of the other uses? Does that put any more burden on them to not do anything annoying, or, that would annoy the residents in the apartment building? Does having that there put any more burden on these adjacent property owners versus if this turns, instead of doing apartments, there's a warehouse put on there or something like that? Do you understand what I mean? I mean, I would think whatever the law is, regardless of what goes in on the subject property here, but I'm just trying to get an expert opinion from you on that.
While he's digging that up, I was kind of kicking around the same thought process, I guess, is that, that the dealership needs to comply with city code now with respect to noise and downlighting, and I'm confident that they do. And if we're saying, the testimony seems to be that we're okay with C-17, which would allow 67 units of housing, versus 120, if you're going to have 67 units, or what's 130? The compliance issues would be the same. I'm sympathetic to that issue because, I've been one that's been in the middle of some of those kind of complaints in the past, but I've got to think that they're in compliance with all of those kind of code provisions now, and they, if there was a complaint from one of the 67 versus one of the 130, the city staff would go out and find out that they're in compliance, and that'd be the end of the day. So I'm struggling with whether this is about compatibilities or whether this is a massing thing, and I don't belittle those comments, but I think as far as the complaint thing, we have the assisted living above Riverstone, and those folks were there before Riverstone came along, and I happen to know a couple people in there, and they like their peace and quiet, and I've never heard of a complaint there. We have apartments at Whitewater and Mill River and the Rudine apartments and so forth. So, I'm not so sure that compatibility is not manageable. I think it's more a massing question, I guess.
Chairman Jordan, let me answer that. I wanted to find the performance standard so I could read it to you. The quick answer is this doesn't really change much for commercial uses across the street when it comes to creation of noise, light, glare, those types of things. The reason being our performance standards are really geared, at least for noise, to protect residentially zoned property. Specific to noise, we measure the offending noise at the point that it reaches residentially zoned property. The request here is for commercial zoning. It's no different than our downtown core, which is a commercial zone. The folks that live in high-rises adjacent to a park where there's a loud concert, whatever going on, those folks do not have the benefit of protection by the noise standard in our code. That's done on purpose. I mean, if you're choosing to live in a mixed-use, dense environment, there's going to be additional noise that comes along with living in those areas that you don't get if you're locating in a single-family neighborhood. So that's the short answer. It really creates no additional burdens for the surrounding areas due to the requested zoning. That's true of noise specifically. For glare, light, it's not as clear how it applies to residential zoning, but it's not something I'm concerned with. It essentially says in all other zoning districts other than manufacturing, if you're creating intense light, intense dust, you have to do those activities indoors. That's not a complaint we've ever had in my time that I've been here. It's not one that I would anticipate seeing, and I don't think that adding residential in a mixed-use environment is going to have any negative impact with regard to that. there may be complaints that we receive. I won't say that that's not going to happen, but the answer that we would give is, you live in a commercial zone, this is a mixed-use development, we can't really do much for you.
So the underlying zone is still C-17,
Right.
regardless of whether there's a residential special use permit, so.
Zone is commercial, regardless
Right.
of what the use is.
So that does not, that does not increase any burden then on the adjacent property owners, other than to comply with the existing laws that are already
Sure.
apply to them. There's always the classic case of the neighborhood by the airport, more planes start landing at the airport, and then the neighbors complain. So I'm trying to clarify that we don't have that here, and it sounds like that's not the situation.
We get the odd complaint about noise from some of the apartments in Riverstone, and the answer is, you live in a mixed-use environment that's zoned commercial.
I have a quick question for staff, and it's a lot of the size, the bulk, and scale. As far as apartments that we have existing within the city, do we have 5 stories somewhere that you could give me a visual? 5 stories anywhere within the city that just to get a feel for how, tall this apartment building would be. It's more tall that I'm looking at.
What are those new ones on Government Way,
Yeah, I'm just
across from Costco there?
across from Costco.
Well, they're on Government, they're just north of Costco on Government Way, where that vacant field was that they put all those apartments in. Those are
those are 5 stories.
4 or 5 story.
I know it's 4, but I'm not sure if it's 5 or not.
Yeah, it's just
About
that
the
5th floor
Rudine.
that's,
Rudine?
You've also got the Hagedorn Apartments in the downtown that's significantly taller than 5 stories. Those are
That's-
apartments.
the north.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got,
Yeah, those are about
we don't
10.
really, I don't know
Those are
that we
10,
distinguish
aren't they?
between apartments and condos that are essentially still residential. You've got obviously the 2 towers across the street that are significantly taller.
Right.
Coeur d'Alene North is significantly taller.
Right, that's the downtown core, and we have talked about that. I guess I'm looking at outside of the downtown core.
Well, we approved, a number of years ago, we approved 4 high-rise mixed-use condos in Riverstone,
We did.
and then they withdrew it because the economy
Right.
turned and they
Right.
weren't saleable anymore.
But I understood that, yeah. Just trying to get a feel for, a lot of it is like precedent setting or whatever, you want to kind of get a feel since we have this. And I call it spot zoning mainly because there's nothing around it. It has a little sliver of the city border to it. And to conceptualize what will happen around this, I'm trying to get a feel for the size, the bulk, and the scale. And in likely terms, what would happen on the east is, since we have such a waste problem, it may end up not livable. It'll have to be on some other form that will use that property, or whoever owns it, because it sounds like you can't build on it at this point.
Let me speak a little bit to your concern about spot zoning. What spot zoning really is an argument that a zoning decision was made that was inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. When the spot zoning is raised in Idaho, that's the question the court answers. Was the zoning decision consistent with your comprehensive plan? So really, it drives you back to my direction to you almost monthly, that
Right.
really look at your findings from your comprehensive plan. If you've complied with your findings, if you've answered on a zoning determination, is this consistent with the comprehensive plan, you're going to be fine.
Right.
That's the bottom analysis. In this instance, you're looking at the comprehensive plan. The characteristics of the Spokane River District will be commercial, residential, and mixed uses. So that's one thing that we're projecting for this area. For areas that have access to the river, we want to see public access to the river. That's one of the things that we're projecting. Densities of 10 to 16 units per acre, with pockets of denser housing not only appropriate but encouraged. So you would have to ask yourself, is this a location where it's not only appropriate, but we want to encourage it?
Right.
So we have anticipated that we will have pockets of higher density. We anticipate open space parks, pedestrian bike connections. So does this give the city the ability to provide or obtain open space park, pedestrian connections? The scale of development will be urban in nature. That again speaks to, this is intended to be fairly dense urban development in this location. But however, the next one is that it's going to be less than the downtown core. So
Right.
it's giving you a sort of a, when you're talking about scale, you want it to be very urban in nature, but not reaching the level of development that your downtown core would allow.
So what would be considered obviously less would, because we have the high-rise densities of the condominiums already as we speak here downtown, this would still be considerably less.
That would be one way to look at it. And
I'm just trying to get my head around the bulk and scale. I think their idea is fine. It's just the bulk and scale, and I'm not uncomfortable with their plan by any means.
So on the comprehensive plan analysis, those are the questions you need to be asking yourself, and then
Right.
weighing the testimony you've heard tonight, the information you've read in your staff report, and filtering it. How does what we've heard tonight meet those elements that,
Right.
that the comprehensive plan is projected for this location?
You know, and I remember in the writing of the comprehensive plan, I didn't agree with that projection. So that's probably why I'm having a hard time getting my mind wrapped around what we're talking about. So
Here in a couple of years, you'll get another crack.
I don't know if I'll be around, but all I'm stating, and that's part of where I'm coming from, but I do hear you very loud and clear. I should ask the applicant, I do have some conditions, and that would have been the all needed, that we needed to have the connections to create adequate pipe standards for sewer and water, and that the applicant indicated that they would take care of that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something I wanted to speak to, but I forgot, got wrapped up in comprehensive plan.
Please.
Based on the comments in the staff report from both the water and the wastewater department saying we need to have a study to make sure that there's capacity, I think that you have to have, if it's going to be a motion for approval, I think you have to have conditions essentially tying them to complete the studies and then do any necessary improvement. If you think back to the training that we've done in the past where we've done, I think it was Woody's Burgers, and part of the analysis was there's not going to be any traffic impediments and there was poor sight distances. You need to have, if there's some evidence or there's evidence that you believe that says that there's a deficiency here, you need to be able to answer that deficiency via a condition.
Okay.
So I think that you would need to have a condition on those items. It would also, I think, be appropriate to address those as a recommendation for inclusion in the annexation agreement, because that's another area where we will speak to utility and infrastructure needs.
Okay, so those are two conditions that you could write up for this proposal. And the third, do we have the ingress egress pretty much put down as far as, I can't remember if it was a condition in the that no left turns and that type of thing with the project?
Actually, on page 14, it would be number 2 under the recommended conditions for
Okay, so
special
you
use
have
permit.
that.
I believe it addresses that, because there's a...
Page 14, thank you. Okay, and da-da-da-da-da. I didn't see any condition as to the shared agreement on the lighting. Is that something that we need to put in this?
I'm not sure that you need to. It's something we will certainly address in the annexation agreement. We did that with Washington Trust. We'll do it with this property, assuming the bulk of the old mill site comes in relatively quickly. They will see that in their
I really
annexation
think
agreement
that
as well.
that needs to be driven, and mainly because of the apartments that are going up and the traffic that's getting on Celtice. I drive it because I go visit my father-in-law. And if you use Atlas at all, it's getting kind of dangerous. So I think that's something we really do need to have addressed soon.
I think it would be appropriate, again, to recommend that it be included in annexation agreement. I think that's something.
Could we put that as a recommendation?
Certainly. We have
Okay.
an area for recommendations for the annexation agreement that I think would be an appropriate item to put on the annexation agreement.
Could you write that for us?
Yeah, I'd certainly be happy to.
Because these are things that,
You could ask all that to be written in your
if
motion.
if I'm being persuaded, I need to have these conditions. And I don't think that we can say anything, because this is not a PUD or anything of the like. But with the site plan, we can't really say anything in regards to what we've seen.
I think that you can. In the
With a
past,
special use
with
permit?
special use permits,
I
you've
think
tied
so.
the applicant to the site plan and said, this is the site plan that you need to build. What staff does in that instance is when something comes in for building permit, we look at what they're submitting and comparing it to what they showed you tonight.
Right.
And if the two don't match up in substantive ways, we put that back on an agenda to come talk to you again.
Okay, I think that that's important.
You
And,
made that part of the record.
okay, and the backside, they said that's where the parking would be. I'm thinking about future and in the future development behind them. If it would, they have plantings in the back, but I'm just trying to envision this building if I'm looking down below, up, and if that does become a residential, I don't know, but I think there should be some address to, make it to where it's not just a wall, or, do you understand what I'm saying, that we have?
I do. I think, point you back to your findings a little bit, that might be getting a bit far afield from what
Yeah.
your findings require.
But I'm just.
The findings, B8B, that Chairman Ingalls referred to earlier, the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses in the vicinity.
I know,
So
there's none.
It's really keyed to what uses are there now.
I know.
Sits up
Again,
high,
that's
too.
partly intentional, because when we're judging people's land use applications, we have to give them a fair hearing. And if we start positing and thinking, well, down the road it could be this or it could be that,
Right.
it's really hard for us to articulate a standard to judge their application against. So that's why we aim it at what's in place now. Does it fit in with what's there?
Okay, thank you.
Are these conditions that Heather's talking about, is that for both the C-17 and the special use?
It's the annexation and the special use, am I not correct?
I think that the way that the staff report was drafted, they were attached to the special use permit.
Okay.
I think, and I read back through some of the wastewater comments, it wasn't clear to me what they were speaking to. I do know that we have done, the wastewater department has done a capacity study for this vicinity, and they've adopted essentially a surcharge that we applied to the Washington Trust piece, would like we also be applying it to this piece, to essentially upsize the infrastructure needed to essentially a C-17 level. So I think it's going to be handled. If you felt more comfortable putting that in as a condition on the zoning as well, I would be comfortable with that, given the way that they've worded it. But I think that in reality, at the end of the day, that's going to be an element that we're going to put in the annexation agreement. We'll collect funds to upsize that infrastructure. My read of this is that what they're really concerned about is that jump from 17 up to 34. That's a
Right.
healthy jump.
They are 34.
I'm very supportive of conditions on the C-17. I am not supportive of the special use permit. I think it's totally incompatible with the property, with annexation. And the connectivity, it seems to me to be speculative in nature. But nevertheless, my position is that the request is not compatible with the surrounding use and the designated appropriate to blend in with the area, as the value, as was commented on page 12, one of the things we need to consider. Thank you.
Hey, Warren, I was hoping to catch Gordon before he left, but the question, yeah, he got away. The question was brought up, you may remember earlier, about how none of these other developments have had to put sidewalks in along Celtice Way. I haven't looked at the sidewalks as I drive through there. You remember that comment? Do you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a
Either
good
you
answer
or-
for you. It's not
either you or
something I've been
Tammy,
involved in.
It seems like sidewalks would be required at building permit. I just wondered if either of you have
And
any.
it's something, frankly, the
comment.
council had a workshop on a couple weeks ago, looking at when sidewalks are required, when they're not. It's something that they're looking at. I couldn't tell you why what happened. I was thinking about it. That must have been before my time here, because I just have no recollection of that at all. So
Well,
I
these are
really
newer-
couldn't give you any more information than what you heard.
Well, that'd be interesting to know, because these are newer developments that have gone in, and my experience has been you almost always get stuck with putting
Yeah,
sidewalks
I
in.
really
And
don't
I don't
know.
recall, I don't know how many sidewalks there are or are not there, because I haven't particularly looked at
And
the
anything I would
sidewalks
tell you, I think would
driving
just be
along there.
speculation. I just don't know.
Would a sidewalk be required here?
I'd have to look and see what they said in the staff report. You would certainly, I think that if you're tying them to the site plan, you're going to have across that frontage a ped bike path. Whether they would require a sidewalk in addition to that, I would guess not.
What about for this, just C-17?
I would guess so, but I can't tell you. I don't review building permits. I don't know, without knowing what happened with the hotels, I just don't know. My gut says it would be, based on the questions, but I don't know.
Hey, Tammy, I assume at our next meeting in May, Gordon probably will be here. Could you put that on the list for him to update us on that?
Sure.
When he comes here, okay. I'd like to know about that.
So you're stating that there will be a ped bike trail in front? That's part of this?
That's on their site plan. So if
Yeah.
you make a condition of approval that they comply with the site plan, that would be required.
Okay, I want to make sure that's part of it. Unfortunately, I have the apartment, the North Winds, I think it is, and the hotels don't have sidewalks. You're right.
But I think there was discussion on that at
And they
some
need
length with
sidewalks.
the council, and I think when Gordon was involved, it'd be interesting here, because I think that was identified as an issue in retrospect, and that they were going to do something, and I want to say I heard that they're not going to let it happen again, but at least it was recognized and there was some discussion on it.
Yeah.
It'd be
We will-
interesting to hear what Gordon says, because I think your point's very well made, you know.
We'll ask Gordon to
Places
come
should have other
address
places.
that question for you. It's not terribly germane to the approval tonight, but we'll make sure that he gets back hopefully tomorrow, or not tomorrow, excuse me, next meeting to discuss that.
It's
No, you're
germane
correct.
if
It's
you
not
gotta- if you
germane
put-
to this, but I think these sidewalks are important. I think everybody would like to know
Sure.
why they're not being required, if they're not, and what the policy is out there. I think that's a concern to everybody. And I think sidewalks are a concern on this if it's approved, so it sounds like there'd be some kind of a condition or something on it. So anyway, if you could just give Gordon a heads up on that so we could talk about that at the next meeting, I
We need
appreciate
a
it.
walk path that'll take you to Riverstone. Okay. Anybody else?
Well, I don't know, if we're doing discussion, I think that this whole corridor is probably likely to be C-17.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm hoping something happens here, you know, that this is some really prime land along here, and I hope something happens that creates a lot of jobs out there. Part of the problem with this land, aside from the economy and the foreclosures and everything that's been going on, part of the problem is railroad divides it, and so you're dealing with the railroad, you're dealing with multi-property ownerships. A lot of things are going on out there. And I don't know how practical it is to take this one 3.8 acre parcel there and say, well, we want to hold this out for something bigger and better. We've already got multiple property ownerships, and, you know, somebody may or may not want to use this property. I can see how this provides something that is not there. I like the idea of the inside corridors and so forth. I think a lot of people would like that for the security and so forth. I could see that would be a real draw to this project. And there's a lot of high-intensity uses around there, so I don't really personally have a problem with the R34 in there. So that's my take. I see a mixture of uses there, but hopefully with the bigger parcels in there, you know, something can happen out there that creates some kind of light industrial and some jobs and that sort of thing. Some good paying jobs out there. But I know that's the goal of a lot of people at Jobs Plus and the Urban Renewal District, and it's just not easy putting all the pieces together out there.
We're discussing. So, see, I was kind of concerned as well that we don't create some kind of concern with the compatibility with the auto dealership or whatever might come to the other sides and whatnot. Warren's point that, you know, this would be commercial, and so the folks that choose to live in the commercial area, don't have quite the same rights of protection, if you will, from noise and that kind of thing. And we're okay with commercial. It's likely to be commercial. There's 67 units by right. So going to 130 then has to do with sewer and traffic and massing and size and the scale and that sort of thing. If 67 folks are going to live there, what's 130 if it's done well? I think this, last P&Z meeting, we kind of used the analogy of a project that might fit into some trees, Hecla-like, and I could see this very much a Hecla-like kind of deal. The street trees would buffer it quite well to the north and other trees to the south. I think this has every bit of opportunity to look much more attractive than, the Costco apartments, if you will. No rub there. They're not unattractive, but I think this would look a lot better than, say, the Rudine apartments that are out on Celtis that are quite towering, and those are attractive as well, but they're not set into a nice grove of mature trees that probably aren't going to go away, at least in my lifetime. So I think I'm with you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm pretty comfortable with the annexation and the R34.
I think just real briefly, the other thing I was going to say, and you brought it up, is if this is all zone C17 as we anticipate along there, there's nothing to say people can't come in with certain parts of that C17 and just pull a building permit by right for an apartment building at C17.
Absolutely.
And although the Rudine apartments farther out Celtis are maybe only 4-story, they're still massive because they're so big and there's so many of them. So
And they're up higher.
And they sit up higher. So one thing about this, with a special use permit he's asking for to get to the R34, he's submitted a site plan that's become part of the record, and we're probably going to make that a condition of the motion, and that shows trees being left on there and so forth, and he's going to have to come back before us if he changes it. So you actually have a lot more control with this
I really
than
like
just
the
a standard
parking.
C17. And I'm almost better with this, where you have some control, than to have it just be C17 and someone could cut the trees down and just build lower density apartments. That's kind of how I take it. And knowing that it doesn't put an additional burden on the other property owners as far as, being able to continue operating like they are. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I have another quick comment, little thought. Commissioner Wolby, you were asking, or you're constantly saying, the size and scope of the building, the bulk. Yes, I'm sorry. And I'm thinking about the the Riverside Towers, where Magnuson McHugh has their office. I'm not sure if that's 4 or 5. I believe it might be closer to 5, if not 5.
At least, yeah.
Sits up quite a bit higher than some of the commercial space down there on Northwest Boulevard.
Right.
Doesn't have any trees buffering
Nothing.
between it and Riverstone. But I don't see, because it was a tastefully architecturally designed building, I don't see that as an obtrusive.
I actually think it's higher than 4. I think it might be 5 or 6.
I believe
it's
it might
got
be 5. But
parking
anyway,
underneath it that
It
really
has parking
shoves it up.
underneath, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so there's more
in
to
the-
it than just the office floors.
Right. So in many ways, I almost kind of liken that building to what's being proposed here. Here, though, it would be, again, set in the trees.
Well, I like
Kind
the
of-
underground parking. I like that
Right,
concept.
which
I like the lack
which
of.
preserves the impervious area,
Mr. Chair, where are the
Minimize
trees
that.
identified in this schematic here?
On the, I think these, I don't know which ones are
Well, which
existing.
ones are, I mean, if we're going to make this condition, a condition there to keep the trees, like the Hecla-like thing, we need to make sure we have an understanding of what those trees are here. I'm not, and maybe they are, maybe they're all reflected there, but if we're talking about, well, this will be great, it's going to be like that, because they're going to keep all the trees, this plan is going to be incorporated in the annexation, we need to make sure that this incorporates the trees that we think it includes.
I think what we were talking about is some of the most critical trees are the trees that are along the street, which are in the right-of-way. So
That doesn't belong to the
that's
property
really
owner.
not the applicant's purview, and I think the city already has say on those.
There's also there's fairly thick with trees down below, so I'm trying to find.
On the backside.
I'm trying to find this, well, on the downhill side. I'm just trying to find this.
South side.
Say, Warren, I have a question for you. How much latitude do we have in seeing a tree preservation plan, or what trees would be saved as far as the existing natural trees that are maybe down below in the front of this apartment building that you'd see from the river or the waterfront down below? Now, it shows trees, but doesn't delineate if those are new little trees that are planted or if those are big old trees.
So I'm not exactly sure how to answer your question. I guess I'll start off with my standard issue recitation that to make a condition, you really are looking at what element of approval can't you quite make without the application of a condition. So if there's one of the conditions of approval that you can't get over the hump without the condition of approval, then I think it's fair game to say, and we want to apply a condition on this element. I don't know that I have sufficient information based on this drawing to be able to tell you what trees are existing, what trees are new, what species they are. I think you can tell from looking at this drawing, it is scaled, it looks like. So it shows landscaping within, I don't know what that distance is, on the front of that building. I think you could potentially have a condition, again, assuming that it's necessary to do your approval, that the trees in that front area will be retained. I don't know what that area, I don't know how wide that is, because I can see a scale, but I don't know what it is.
I think the nexus would be the additional height they're asking for to get the R34. The trees would be a screen, a sort of a screening and a buffer to.
The natural trees that are there, because they're
I
already.
would say to help partially screen and soften the additional height they're asking for. I think that's the relationship to it. You asked.
Yeah, and again, I'm not here to judge that. That's your call on how you want to approve or disapprove of items.
I wouldn't mind if someone
If
made a.
that's where you want to go, I suppose the condition that I would coach you on would be retaining the existing tree cover outside of the building envelope as depicted on the site plan. That gives us an idea of what to start with.
Is it permissible if someone made a motion to bring the applicant back down here to ask him about what he?
If you do that, you can do that, certainly. If you do that, you have to reopen testimony to take any testimony in opposition that you might get.
I so move that we open it up again.
I don't know if that's such a good idea. Because you have to open up all of it.
No, there's nothing. We didn't have much discussion before. You know, well.
Well, we can do that, or we can just. I guess we can make it part of the findings that we're taking it that these trees in front are the natural trees as part of the site plan. I'll leave it at that. But you have a motion.
I do.
Is there a second for your motion?
And how persuade you to think differently?
Okay.
No, I've been on many groups, and I've always find it interesting when a motion is not seconded, just to have discussion. But that's fine. I spoke my piece, and wasn't it? And I respect my fellow commissioners. I mean, the majority rules, and I respect that, and that's the way it should be.
I thank you for making a motion.
Nobody else wanted a second.
Okay. Any more discussion, or is someone ready to make a motion?
Are we going to, is your preference
One way or the other.
to take the annexation C-17 separately than the R-34 special use permit? Or is it all one
What's the
motion?
attorney's recommendation?
I think they are separate motions. I think if you're going to do them yourself tonight, you'd need to walk through them separately. If, on the other hand, you want to direct staff to prepare the findings and bring them back to you, I think you can do that in one motion, as long as you identify for us what the conditions of approval are and to which approval they attach, so that we can make sure that we get those correct for you.
I'll start with the easy one. I'd like to make a motion that the Planning Commission approve the zoning prior to annexation to C-17 based on findings, and direct staff to make the findings based on findings adopting B1 through B8, B9 that utilities and facilities are available, sewers, water are available, street system is adequate. B10 that the physical characteristics of the site do make it suitable based on topography and so forth. And B11 that the proposal would not adversely affect surrounding neighborhood with regards to traffic, neighborhood character, and existing land uses, and so that the Planning Commission finds that the request for River Edge Apartments LLC for zoning prior to annexation be approved.
So that is for the annexation, and what
C-17.
conditions did you put down? With those
Thank you. I'm still working.
Good.
With the conditions that the Deputy City Attorney suggested with regards to traffic, sewer study, water capacity, sewer capacity studies. What did I miss?
Sidewalks? Did you want to include sidewalks?
Sidewalks.
Sidewalks and connectivity.
Yeah, I'd say sidewalks or walking/bike trailers may be deemed appropriate
So
by this.
for this one, I think the ones that you would be looking at, if items for recommended for the annexation agreement was traffic light, water and wastewater improvements, the traffic issues, I believe the rest would be germane to the special use permit, because that's where you tie it to the site plan. And the
Okay,
site
so-
plan isn't
So those are all
relevant to the zoning
incorporated into your
request.
motion?
Just, yes.
Does that include sidewalks?
Sidewalks are a matter of code. That's driven by code with development. In this instance, if you tie the approval of the special use permit to the site plan, depicts a ped bike path. So that's what you would see developed.
So if it's just C-17, we cannot put a condition sidewalks, because that's,
We're
Now,
not
that would
really-
that would come with building permit
Very-
application.
Okay, so you got everything you think is appropriate, correct, Warren?
For the C-17.
Looking at the list, I think so, yes.
I will second that
Okay.
motion.
Okay, so we have a second by Lutrip. Any discussion on this? This is the C-17 zoning prior to annexation motion. No discussion? Okay, roll call, Shanna.
Colby? Colby?
Oh, Bowlby, yes.
Okay.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Lutrip?
Yes,
Ward?
Yes.
Okay, so the C-17 zoning prior to annexation is approved. Now, we have the special use permit, SP 1-14.
That's a little bit harder.
That gets more interesting.
I would, I explained my logic, so I'll support a motion to, for the Planning Commission to approve the R34 special use permit based on the findings B1 through B7, B8A, that the proposal is in conformance with the comp plan, B8B, that the design of and planning of the site is compatible with the location, and that the density fits. B8C, that the design and size of the proposal will be adequately served by streets, public use, services, and utilities. with the conditions that we described. Again, I think we would reiterate in the special use permit, would we not, Mr. Wilson, the traffic, the signal, the sewer study, the water capacity, sewer capacity, and as we've discussed up here, some clarification on retention of trees and locking in the site plan, such that deviations from that would require a trip back to P and Z in the future for deviations of that. And with that,
Which would include the bike path.
including the connectivity of bike path and/or connectivity devices.
So on those last two, the conditions that I've written down is must comply with the site plan and retain existing trees outside the building envelope.
That's what I meant to say.
Is there some way to make it clear in your motion, if you agree with us, that on the lower part of the property here, all these trees that run along the front, that depicts natural mature ponderosa pines that are being retained in that site plan?
As many.
Or as many, yeah.
So the motion would be that we assume that to be the case, and that, those trees that we see in that site plan, are, if they're existing, that are portrayed as preserved, that they're to stay.
Right,
by locking
as
in the
opposed to
site
being
plan.
cut down and having tiny little trees
Correct.
planted. And if it varies substantially from that, then the staff would come back with a interpretation from us
So
when we have a more
What we would
defined
end
site
up
plan.
doing at building permit time for this item, assuming that this is approved and those two conditions are in place, we would essentially require a landscaping plan that shows us what's existing, what's new, and even if all of those aren't existing, they're depicting plantings in those areas, so we would be expecting on the landscaping plan to see trees in those vicinities where they're depicted, even if they're not existing, so that they would retain the existing trees and then plant new trees to match the site plan if they're not there currently.
I think that's true, and I think, I'm not trying not to speak for everyone, but I'm just to try and get this done. I'm thinking that it seemed like it's important to this commission that they retain the natural trees, and I think from the testimony that the applicant was giving, I understood from his testimony that they're retaining a lot of the natural trees along there too. So,
And I think the intent of the motion too states that sticking to the conceptual site plan, that's what we'll get, is the trees.
I don't know what the exact wording is, Warren. Obviously, some trees are going to have to go, but I think there's a understanding from the commission here that a good number of the natural ponderosa pines would be retained as possible in front along where he has this line of trees. So I don't know at what point the staff would send it to us for an interpretation, or if we have the right to review the more detailed landscaping plan. You understand where I'm going?
Yeah, like I said, the condition, as I understand it, would be you comply with the site plan and that you also retain the existing trees outside of the building envelope.
Okay.
As depicted. So if they're not in substantial compliance with either of those items, they'll be back talking with you folks.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the motion.
That's a great motion you did. You think we got everything, Warren?
I think you've got it all covered.
Thanks, Tammy. Okay, discussion.
We need a second.
I'll second it.
I thought, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Thank you for seconding that, Commissioner Ward. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I find this process very interesting and very enlightening and very good. We had a lot of discussion. I certainly agree with a lot of the conditions we have on here. And this is healthy. This is how I see us working. Having said that, I still can't get past the fact that I believe this is just out of place. It is out of scale. It is not compatible with the surrounding area. Granted, there may be other 5-unit apartments, other places and so forth, but to me, this is not. I appreciate the conditions we put on them, but I'm sorry they just weren't, it still is incompatible with the location for me, so I'll be voting against this.
Okay, any other discussion?
The bulk and scale got me, but I like the idea that we've got the conditions, and anything can go in there. I doubt we'll have this opportunity. And the internal corridor, I don't believe we have any place like that for rent where people have that opportunity. And I can envision it will be large, but we don't know what's going to happen around that. We have no idea, and it's a rental. So I'm comfortable with our decision-making. I'm comfortable with it.
One point of clarification. So if this special use is approved, then that runs with the property. What type of changes from this will have to come before us? Because I thought when we approved something, it ran with the property.
The special use does, correct, Warren?
So this is with the property, yes.
Right, so if the owner decides they don't want to do that or sells it to somebody else, and so what, is the future owner bound by this site plan?
So it's a more complicated answer than the question would lead you to believe. It depends on how far down the road they got. At some point, the approval lapses. So if they've not done anything to essentially activate the special use permit within a year, they either have to come in and ask for an extension, or the approval lapses and they have to start all over again. So if they've done something to activate that use, so to speak, and midway through the project, they sell it to someone else, obviously they've got to comply with the site plan. If nothing happens, if it lies fallow, the approval goes away.
So once we approve this, then it stays in place for a certain period of time, or once they start working on it, one or the other, they will be bound. If they start working on it before it lapses, they'll be bound by this.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Warren, to carry this out a little further, let's say for whatever reason something happens with the financing and this doesn't get off the ground or something, and we go 2 or 3 years and the special use permit is lapsed, the underlying C-17 zone would be there,
Yeah,
right?
C-17 is still in place. That is there forever.
Right, and would just be a standard C-17 zone with no particular additional approvals.
So this isn't unlike a PUD.
Well,
There's a lot of similarities.
yeah.
Okay. Now, I think my questions were answered. That helps me. We'll change
The PUD allows you to waive different,
Right.
requirements and, yeah.
And it could be progressive through the years, like Court Lane Place.
Any more discussion? Okay, Shanna, how about roll call?
Colby?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes?
Lutrip?
No.
Ward?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's a 3 to 1 vote, if I count right, that's approved. SP 1-14. And then, let's see, the zone change and annexation will move up to the council. This also can be appealed within 30 days to the city council.
Only the annexation portion will move on to city council.
Right. The special use permit stays, but it can be appealed within 30 days. Okay, then we have the next one. Now, before we do this next public hearing, does anyone want to do a break, or are we okay to do the next hearing? Okay, here we go.
Keep going.
Applicant is Jennifer McMeekin. Hope I did the name right. The location is 1583 West Dalton Avenue, proposed community education special use permit in the R12 zoning district. This is quasi judicial SP-2-14.
So you all ready? You did it while I was getting everything up.
You know, we're just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to go here.
No kidding. You move quickly. All right. So, thank you. Sean Holm, Planning Department. So there is a request before you for a special use permit for community education. Our applicant is Jennifer McMeekin. The owner is Edgar Castellanos, I believe is how you pronounce that. And as you can see, the property is zoned R12. It is right here. It is on the corner of Dalton and Ramsey. Unlike the previous request, everything is in place. There is sidewalks, there's utilities, there are street trees, there's an existing building, there's a place for the kids to play, there's parking, it's already there. So, just like the other special use permit, there are 3 findings that need to be made. Here they are, and we'll move through those. First is whether or not it's in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Subject property is denoted right here in white. It falls within the Ramsey Woodland Stable Established District. The purple denotes that. Here is the Ramsey Woodland Today language that is found in the comprehensive plan. It can be found also in your guys' staff report, as well as Ramsey Woodland Tomorrow and the characteristics of this district into the future. Also, there are the goals and policies that are identified from the comprehensive plan that can be found on page 4 of the staff report. The second finding is whether the design and planning of the site is compatible or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. As I had already mentioned, it exists already. There is pedestrian connectivity. It's on the corner. And also the subject property has been used and approved previously twice for religious assembly and once for community education, which is what the request is for. Here is a picture of the subject property. Here's the conceptual site plan as it's already been built out. There is no improvements that are proposed. There's a backyard play area here, the structure, the parking out front, the roads, street trees, and pedestrian access. Current zoning, as I had mentioned, is R12. We have residential zoning all around. There's PUD across the street directly to the west, R8 to the south. As well as the land uses within the area. Everything around the subject property is residential in nature. The subject property actually was already this way inside of our mapping program as being civic because of the prior use. And the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. I've put in here the comments that we got from our departments. The gist of it is that everything already exists and they do not see any issues with the special use permit. Stormwater and street, traffic, and fire. Here are again the 3 findings that need to be made for approval or denial. And that being said, there are no recommended conditions. We mailed 57 notices on the 21st of March. And Planning Commission must consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. Your findings worksheet is attached to the staff report. And with that is my staff report, and if there's any questions.
Of the 57 notices, Sean, what was the sense of those?
I would have to ask Shanna that. I didn't hear of any. I didn't get any that came across my desk for...
None came
None
back?
for or against.
None came back.
I
Really?
think with the first special use permit, because I remember it, there were a few people that attended.
You know, I take that back. I had a couple phone calls from people in the area and asked about the project. And when I told them, they were fine with it.
Right. It's been in existence, functioning like this, because I
Yeah.
remember when it came to us, this is for a special use permit, I don't know how many years ago.
Yeah, and they just, you know, were happy. Kids were playing in the background anyway.
I mean, I remember the first go. There were quite a few people out here then.
Now, it's coming back to us because it lapsed, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, after 2 years, it expires.
Right. I remember when it came to us. Okay.
Okay.
So if a special use permit is approved, and then the facility is used based on whether that special use permit was, when does it lapse? When that is quit being used that way?
Correct.
Again, a question that's not as easy to answer as one would think. So the building was designed and built as a church.
Right.
That use is governed by a state statute that says essentially you can't essentially time out the use of a building for its designed purpose for a period of 10 years. So if this was a religious use, they've got a 10-year window that they're working with. This building, or the use, this was probably, 6 years ago, when it came in previously for the community education. That wasn't this building's intended use, its designed function. So it lapsed after the use, this was discontinued, it lapsed after a couple years. So it's not as,
Was it used as a school?
for a very limited period of time.
And what caused it to lapse?
They just went out of business, is my
They
understanding.
went out of business. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so then the use lapsed.
Okay.
It went back to, reverted back to
But a church is different. A
use.
church has a time frame on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I believe that was
use it was designed
2005.
for.
Yeah.
Okay, so like the previous one we had, that special use is not going to lapse unless they decide to turn it into a hospital.
Not necessarily. If they don't do anything to activate the use,
Well, I'm sorry, absent that.
yeah, so if they don't activate it, it's going to lapse. If they do activate it, they build the structure, that use is then allowed for essentially as long as that building's occupied and in use.
As we define, as an apartment building or whatever. Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question? What has it been used for then, after the lapse of the special use? Back to a church? Or has it just sat free?
Yeah, it was a church. I used to drive past it on my way home.
But it was back, went back to, I mean, it always was a church. They used it as a church, but they also used it as an educational. Remember, they wanted to,
Actually, I think it was a church, and then the church
Then the
moved out.
education?
Education use moved in. Education use moved out. Another church moved in.
came back in.
They moved out, and then
Okay.
it was for lease for a significant period of time.
Okay.
Any other
Interesting.
questions of
Interesting.
our expert staff up there, Sean? Okay.
Thank you.
Sean? Okay, this is when you come up, Jennifer. Just state your name and address, and then you can raise your right hand, and I'll swear you in.
Okay. My name's Jennifer McMeekin. I live at 1997 West Hogan Street.
Okay, and you
Really?
swear the testimony you're going to give us tonight will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. So we would like to establish a Montessori school at the 1583 West Dalton location. There are currently no Montessori schools in Coeur d'Alene. They're extremely progressive and successful. The Coeur d'Alene Montessori School will be a premier in the area. It's a prominent alternative to traditional learning centers and daycare settings. The school will offer and apply developmentally appropriate and educationally sound principles of learning. We will focus on presenting instruction that inspires children to think, question, discover, and work to their full potential. The school will encompass students ages 2 through kindergarten, and it's previously been used as a daycare. Do you have any questions?
So you're all done?
That's it. yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
I just
don't
have
have
one
anything to-
question.
Yeah.
The
Go ahead.
population base, I think you did mention that it would be about the same as the former use as far as the special use permit.
Well, it depends on, really, it depends on the need and how many students the maximum would be about 72 students in 5 classrooms.
Okay.
So-
Okay, and I think that's what it was before. Can't remember. The church. Okay, thank you.
I didn't have a chance to look into that, and for whatever reason, a previous version of this permit had listed the number of students, and I looked into the code, and the code will allow you to set like the number of beds for a different type of use, but it doesn't really say that you would set the number of students for a
facility.
daycare or this use.
It's really more driven by the parking, isn't it? And the capability of the building to be able to handle that number?
Yeah, it's a number of things, for like fire resistive qualities
Right.
and things of that nature, parking, and there's a bunch of different
Right.
things that go into play of how many students can be at the site.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, I guess not. So, unless there's anything else you want to add, you're all done. Okay? Did anyone else want to testify on this matter?
That's my husband. I don't think he wants
He doesn't want to testify, all right?
Thank you
I
for
don't have
sitting
anyone else
through all
signed up. Well, you probably don't need your rebuttal time then, unless there's any, I say you probably don't need any time for rebuttal then. Okay.
Can we move to approve this and have the plans developed by the staff?
Well, if we do that, it means that they have to wait a month, so it all depends upon, because this is a pretty easy one to go through. Don't you think, staff, that it does help because it does accelerate
It certainly
ability.
doesn't hold them hostage for a month. It's
Right.
one that frankly will be simple for staff to do, so if you would like us to do it, we're happy to do it.
Is there a
It's up to-
commissioner like you that would like to make a motion?
Well, I could do it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I can do the motion. It's a pretty simple motion, so won't be held hostage then at all. So, here we go. Okay, this matter coming before the Planning Commission on April 8th, 2014, and there being present a person requesting approval of item SP 214, a request for community education special use permit in the R12 zoning district to allow the operation of a Montessori preschool and kindergarten. Applicant is Jennifer McMeekin. Thank you. And the location is 1583 West Dalton Avenue, located on the northeast corner of the intersection of Ramsey Road and Dalton Avenue, measuring a little over 1.5 acres. I would like to adopt B1 through B6, and the testimony that we received was from the applicant. And B8, pursuant to Section 1709-220, special use permit criteria. A special use permit may be approved only if the proposal conforms to all of the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. And that criteria, that the B8A, the proposal, is in conformance with a comprehensive plan as follows. And I would like to identify that the Ramsey area is a stable established area. This has been in use. It was a church previous to this and also an educational facility. The use has been in existence, that was stated, around 13 years as far as the educational potentials, and has been used as a church, as I had mentioned. The efficiency, this has already been it's been a church, like I said, but also a school. And under efficiency 1.14, to promote the efficient use of existing infrastructure, thereby reducing impacts to undeveloped areas. This has, again, already been used for this type of school. Let's see, neighborhoods. 3.05, is to protect and preserve existing neighborhoods from incompatible land uses and developments. 3.06. I think that's probably enough on that. Okay, finding B8B. The design and planning of the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. As far as the staff report, the statement here is that currently the property has been pedestrian connective along both frontages. There are sidewalks. There's sufficient parking on site on the area. The neighborhood is residential in nature. And again, stating the subject property has been used as a religious assembly and a community education facility for many years. And the special use permit is coming in since it had lapsed. I would like to, okay. B8C, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. There is adequate water. The wastewater is sufficient. Stormwater is taken care of. The subject property is bordered by Ramsey Road on the west and Dalton Avenue on the south. Everything is developed to city standards and meet current requirements. As far as traffic, there are designations for elementary schools, private schools, and daycare. That's interesting. The proposed use is an amalgam of these. Thank you. And defined vehicle estimated utilizing them would likely be okay. It's fine with traffic since it's already been used as such. Fire is fine. And it states also that there are no conditions. So, conclusion and design. The Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Jennifer McMeekin for a special use permit, as described in this application, should be approved. And again, I said there were no conditions.
All right. We're waiting for a second.
Second.
Okay, second by Luttrip, motion by Bowlby. Any discussion on this item? Okay, moving right along. Roll call, Shanna?
Bowlby?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Luttrip?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. So you are approved, SP 2-14. If you have any questions, you can just talk to the staff. All right, we have one more item. Ordinance item, City of Coeur d'Alene is the applicant. This is concerning the neighborhood commercial and, I forgot what CC is. Is that community?
Community commercial.
Community commercial. Zoning districts. Below grade residential units. This is O-1-14.
So I'm going to sit here because this is a pretty quick item, and we don't have any folks to testify, it looks like. So the purpose of this amendment or proposed amendment is in our NC and CC zones, neighborhood commercial, community commercial, and for those of you who are newer to the commission, these zones were adopted, 8-10 years ago at this point, with an eye to creating low-intensity, small-scale zoning districts that would make sense as a neighborhood commercial service node. So you could put them in a residential area where they would blend in and service the needs of the residential neighborhood around it. Very small differences in scale between NC and CC. One's a little bit more intensive than the other. That's really the sole distinction between the two of them. We have always allowed or required that the ground floor of these structures, when they're new structures, that those had to be the commercial element. You wanted to make sure that ground floor was there to service the commercial nature of the zone. We have always allowed a residential unit upstairs above that first floor commercial unit. We've had a couple of instances where people have come in and said, I have an existing basement in this structure that I have an existing apartment in. I would like to be able to continue to use that apartment. And for the life of us, we frankly couldn't think of a reason why you wouldn't allow a basement apartment unit just like you would a second floor apartment unit. So this change was one that we could do relatively quickly, fairly discreet change that would authorize you would still be requiring the ground floor be commercial, but that second story or the below grade apartment would both be authorized to be residential.
The only question I have on that is that you'd have to have two entries, just for safety's sake. It can't just be one in a basement, because you don't have windows to be able to get out
Sure,
of.
you're still going to have to meet all of the building code requirements
Right.
for access and egress, all of
Right.
those things. None of that changes. You would just have to design it such that you can comply with those and still build the structure.
Okay, that's all that would be driven by just the codes. So, sure, okay. I would recommend that the city council adopt an ordinance to implement the requested changes.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Bowlby and a second by Ward. Is there any discussion on this one? Right. Is this a simple vote? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, hearing no opposed, that passes unanimously. O-1-14. Now, would there be a motion for?
Mr. Chair, before we do
Okay,
that, if
sure.
I could follow up on what we had earlier tonight very quickly.
Okay.
Was commented to us that possibly we should ask, we should ask or request, or the city should have a little marker showing where Second Street comes down and goes through part of the PUD, and I would also think part of Front and Second. I think that the city should be proud of their ownership, should be proud of the hospitality company and what they put in there, and that's going to be a very nice connection between the park, between both parks, and coming down from Sherman down Second there. It's very nice. It seemed to me to be appropriate and suitable to have some type of, not a street sign, I don't want a big street sign, say,
Walking
formally.
path.
Yeah, but just a little plaque, which you've seen in other places, that just sort of denotes that, this is part of the city ownership. We're in partnership with the hospitality company. I think it's something that everybody be proud of. I know I certainly would be. And I think that would maybe some wisdom to request that of the city council if they'd like.
So, yeah, you're thinking of something such as this land is publicly owned by the city of Coeur d'Alene and maintained by the,
Whatever it would be, but my issue is so so the public knows
Right.
that part of this part of it is public property. We don't have to go and maintain or whatnot. It's going to be maintained, but it is part of the public, and
It's a
we're in partnership with them, and it's
Sure.
It's
I'm just asking.
I'm not thinking something big elaborate. You draw lines there and say, okay, we're going to maintain this, and they're going to. It's just identification, just acknowledgement.
So, to get full use out of our legal counsel tonight, how would something like this transpire, Warren? Would this be a recommendation to the council?
So first you'd put it on the agenda for your next meeting, because it's
Okay.
not an agenda item tonight, and so you can't take action on it tonight.
Okay,
You would have to discuss it at your next meeting, and we would invite folks that might have information pertaining to that to come speak to you. Then in theory, you could make a request of the city council. There is essentially an agreement between Hagedorn Hospitality and the city that governs and regulates how that space is used. It's been in place for 25, 30 years, for a long time.
1984 or somewhere like that.
A long time. So the use at this point is regulated by that agreement. And there was, frankly, just an amendment to that agreement by the council recently. So you would essentially be asking the council to reopen a contract and negotiate that element.
I'd be more than happy to request to be put on the agenda, but my idea is not to have to negotiate with somebody You know, if we talk to
Right.
them, that's fine. This isn't.
Just want a simple
this is-
plaque
this is a
denoting
par-
that
this
it's
is a-
public property.
This is a partnership.
identify.
It's a
Right.
partnership, so.
Right. So you can,
Can
we
we
can
put it
certainly
on?
discuss it at the next meeting. You could make a motion to have this put on the agenda for discussion.
Then I will have 2 items on the agenda for discussion by motion, won't I?
Well, maybe there have to be separate motions, but go
Well,
ahead.
that's, I mean, I've told myself I would talk less. I move that we put on the agenda to discuss the possibility of noting the public land in a very tasteful way, showing we're in partnership with the hospitality company.
Okay, and you're talking about the strip of land from First Street down to the...
Right,
Wide.
whatever that strip is. I don't think it's very wide, you know, and it goes, I think there's a little duck down. And also just acknowledgement of where it's going from front up to second, you know. And this,
Okay. Is there a second to your motion to put that on the
Just
agenda?
a question on this. If this isn't going to drive a change for negotiation, I mean,
I don't know that. My guess would be that you're looking at renegotiating the agreement, because it's not as simple as saying that you're now entering city property, because it's a fairly narrow strip. There's almost no way to identify it short of fencing it, or
Making
putting
it a
something
yellow brick
that
road.
defines that boundary. It's,
see,
I don't
now,
think they're
don't
asking-
wanna-
we're
That's
dealing
not-
with
that's not
an
the-
entity
I
that's
don't-
fairly specific about their landscaping and how they want, I think they would tell you they want things to look a certain way.
Right.
I don't want to speak for them, but my guess is that that would be something they would want to come talk to you about.
let me be very clear. My desire is not to have a big sign and so on. It's something that's tasteful, that, you know, if we need to talk to the hospitality company, fine. I'm sure that we can work some. It's not a big, we maintain this, you know, on city property or off city property, follow the, it's not that at all. And I think that I would be confident that whoever needs to talk to city or to the hospitality company and come up with some type of mutually acceptable thing. If we have to have a public hearing and so forth, I think we need to structure it very well, because it's not my desire to open up a whole can of worms. It's just a very simple thing, and
It is, but this is the reason we have agendas. We have to put items on the agenda to notify the public if we're going to take action on an item, because the public has a right to know what the public's business is being done.
Warren, I'm not arguing against that. What you commented on was rather much more elaborate than I was thinking about in identifying, you know, what the city is. I certainly support having it on the agenda, and I so move, and there.
Well, so the motion is just to put this on the agenda to discuss.
To have a discussion,
So-
mhm,
Or we can't discuss it. And I think if I understand you right, Warren, this isn't really, if we did decide to do something, this isn't really within the purview of the planning commission. It would be if we did decide to take action, it would be a recommendation to the council.
It would be a recommendation to the council.
But anyway, right now,
Yeah.
Peter's motion is just to put this on the agenda so we can discuss it. So is
Well,
there a second
I'll
to that?
second it, so we
Okay,
can have
second
the
by
discussion.
Bowlby. Okay, is there any discussion about this motion to discuss that issue? Okay. Okay, all in favor of putting that item on the agenda for discussion at the next meeting?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we'll just add that for discussion. Then you had one more motion?
Well,
Or did we already do that?
I think we already did that. Did
On
we
the,
not have on the
swearing
agenda
in?
the swearing in? Is
That
that,
on the, did we put that on the agenda for next time?
I don't know, we can put it on the agenda. I don't know how that was handled. That was a couple hours ago, but I believe that we discussed putting it on the agenda, so.
Well, just in case, is there a motion, do we need a motion to put it on the agenda? Or can you just add it to the
I think it'll
agenda?
be on the agenda. I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay, so we'll add that to the agenda to have discussion about swearing in the new commissioners. Anything else?
thank you, Mr.
Is it
Chair.
ready, is it time for a motion for adjournment now?
So moved.
Motion by Bowlby.
Could I second that,
A
please,
second
so
by
I can
Wintrip.
participate
Okay, all
in
in
ending
favor?
this?
Aye.
Aye.
Right?
Aye.
Okay, so that's approved. Now we're adjourned.